Chapter 2183. Wu Jinlong, Sr., help me take revenge. I know you have the ability. Shi Ping is willing to do anything for you. Lin Shiping knelt down in front of Zhuo Wen, kowtowing loudly and shouting herself hoarse. Zhuo helped Lin Shiping up and said, "Don't worry, even if you didn't say anything, I will seek justice for your tribe. Now, bring me to the Python tribe." Lin Shiping wiped away her tears and led Zhuo to the east. Night fell. In the skeleton world, it was especially cold and gloomy. In the dense bone forest, one could see the light of fire from time to time. Many tribes nearby had built bonfires, roasted meat, and danced, celebrating that they had survived the day. The Python tribe was one of the local leaders of the bone forest. It was located in the empty land in the east. There were 4 huge skull caves in the tribe, and each skull cave was several times bigger than Lin Shiping's cave. In front of the bonfire, the chief of the Python tribe, Wu Jinlong, sat on a chair made of bones. On both sides of him were beautiful maids, holding plates and standing respectfully. In front of Wu Jinlong, the man in bone clothes knelt on one knee, looking extremely nervous. Lin Shiping and that strange man still haven't left the dark spirit bone forest. Wu Jinlong was a dwarf old man. His eyes were extremely small, and his upper body was bare. His skin was so dry that one could see the protruding ribs on his chest. It could be said that this old man looked even worse than old Wu Qing. Although Wu Jinlong's appearance was not flattering, in the Python tribe, his prestige was not small. From the nervous expression of the man in bone clothes, one could tell that Wu Jinlong meant what he said in the Python tribe. "Yes, Chief. It's dark now, and I think those 2 must have died in the dark spirit bone forest, so I called my brothers back. But before I came back, I destroyed that bitch's tribe." The man in bone clothes said carefully, I'll give you half a month's time. If you can't get them back, you can come to me with your head in your hands." Wu Jinlong said indifferently. The bone-clothed man's complexion changed slightly. One had to know that they would be extremely thankful if they were able to obtain even 1 mid-grade beast bone in a month. Now, the chief had directly asked him to collect more than 20 mid-grade beast bones in half a month. This was an impossible task. However, the bone-robed man didn't dare to refute. He knew very well that he couldn't disobey the old man in front of him. Once he did, he would be dead for sure. "Understood." The bone-clothed man nodded. "You may leave." Wu Jinlong raised his head and enjoyed the clothes of the 2 maids behind him. Bang, bang. All of a sudden, 2 sounds of air being torn apart could be heard as they blasted towards Wu Jinlong. Wu Jinlong abruptly opened his eyes. Although the old man was short, he was extremely agile and dodged the 2 whooshing sounds that pierced through the air. After Wu Jinlong landed on the ground, his expression turned ugly as he discovered that the 2 figures who had rushed over were members of their Python tribe. "Who is it?" Wu Jinlong suppressed his anger and asked. In front of the bonfire, 2 indistinct figures slowly walked over. It was a man and a woman. This man and woman were none other than Zhuo and Lin Shiping, who had rushed over. "It's you 2? The bone-clothed man recognized Zhuo and Lin Shiping and hurriedly whispered a few words in Wu Jinlong's ear. The latter also knew the 2's identity. Entering the dark spirit bone forest and not dying, the 2 of you are quite lucky. Are you here today to offer a humble apology?" Wu Jinlong said coldly. "Who destroyed our tribe's cave and killed our tribesmen? Hand over the culprit." Zhuo said indifferently. The bone-clothed man sneered. "Who do you think you are? The moment you arrive, you are so arrogant and want us to hand over the culprit. You are simply courting death." Wu Jinlong stared coldly at Zhuo and said, "Where did you get the courage to come to our Python tribe? If you know what's good for you, kneel down, crawl over here, and beg for mercy. Perhaps I will leave your corpse intact." Wu Jinlong had just finished speaking when the black-clothed Zhuowen, who was hiding in the dark, flicked his finger. A bolt of lightning shot out and landed on Wu Jinlong's legs. The lightning bolt flashed past, and Wu Jinlong's legs below his knees turned into nothingness. Wu Jinlong fell to the ground in an extremely sorry state. "You want to leave my corpse intact, but I don't want to leave yours intact," Zhuowen said indifferently. Wu Jinlong's broken legs were too strange. The tribesmen of the Python tribe all picked up their weapons and stared murderously at Zhuowen. "What did you do to me? You bastard!" Wu Jinlong was flustered and exasperated, but a trace of fear rose in his heart. "Hand over the culprit, and I can spare your lives," Zhuowen said with a frown. "Kill him. Kill this son of a bitch." Although Wu Jinlong was extremely frightened by his broken legs, he knew that it must have something to do with this young man in front of him. He immediately ordered the tribesmen to hack this young man to death. Unfortunately, the moment the tribesmen of the Python tribe rushed towards Zhuowen, they were blocked by a lightning wall. The terrifying lightning blasted all of them into charred corpses. In the blink of an eye, 70% of the tribesmen of the Python tribe were killed by the lightning wall. The rest of the tribesmen screamed and fled in all directions. Unfortunately, their speed could not be faster than the lightning. Under the attack of the lightning, they were all turned into charred corpses. "Since you guys don't know what's good for you, you'll have to drink a forfeit," Zhuowen said indifferently, and his eyes fell on the bone-clothed man and Wu Jinlong, who were stunned on the spot. Under the attack, just now, all the tribesmen of the Python tribe were dead, and only the two of them were left. That's a divine ability. How is that possible? How can you use a divine ability in the bone world? The bone-clothed man's eyes were filled with fear, and he immediately ran away. "Don't kill me. The one who led the tribesmen to destroy your tribe was this bone powder. It was this guy who killed you. It has nothing to do with me." Wu Jinlong immediately distanced himself from the bone powder. Zhuowen was too terrifying. He killed all the tribesmen of the Python tribe in an instant. They were not on the same level at all. It was simply a one-sided massacre. The bone-clothed man ran even faster. Unfortunately, before he could escape far, he was chased by a bolt of lightning and was killed. Zhuowen searched the cave of the Python tribe and found nearly 100 beast bones. Although the tribe had set up many formations, it was a pity that in Zhuowen's eyes, these formations were too crude and could be broken at any time. "Let's go." Putting away the beast bones, Zhuowen left the Python tribe with Lin sheeping. In the huge Python tribe, only Wu Jinlong was left. He was alone in the sea of blood and mountains of corpses, constantly struggling. Zhuowen didn't kill Wu Jinlong, but it wasn't much different from killing him. In this dangerous bone forest, Wu Jinlong's legs were broken, which meant that he was half crippled. He couldn't take care of himself, so he couldn't live for long. Zhuowen and Lin sheeping found a relatively clean space. Zhuowen took out 50 beast bones and set up a level 5 defensive formation in a 10-jong radius. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground. Since the real body couldn't use its power in the bone world, Zhuowen had put it in the Tsanglan secret territory and let the black-clothed Zhuowen take care of things. The reason why he did this was that the black-clothed Zhuowen's real body, Devour, could obtain many benefits in the bone world. Chapter 2184. The Girl in the Blood-Red Skirt. In the next 3 days, Zhuowen and Lin sheeping went to the Dark Spirit Bone Forest a few more times and obtained a lot of middle-grade and high-grade beast bones. Among them, Zhuowen gave the middle-grade beast bones to Lin sheeping for safekeeping, while the high-grade beast bones were kept by Zhuowen himself. Since the internal world and the Songlan secret territory couldn't store the beast bones, and Zhuowen had a lot of them. Zhuowen planned to use the beast bones to refine the array discs first. He knew that once the beast bones were refined into array discs, they would be stained with his aura. Things that didn't belong to the bone world could be stored in the bone world. After collecting enough beast bones, Zhuowen went into seclusion for 10 days in the temporary camp. Although he couldn't use his soul consciousness and god power, Zhuowen could use Devour's extreme flame and the technique of the divine formation master to refine the beast bones into a formation disc. Zhuowen used the 9 nines to 1 method, which meant that he fused 81 high-grade beast bones to form an array disc. He had a lot of high-grade beast bones, which was enough for Zhuowen to refine more than 10 array discs. However, Zhuowen didn't refine all of the high-grade beast bones into array discs. He only refined 9 array discs, which he named beast bone array discs. After the 9 array discs were refined, Zhuowen used a special method to carve the array patterns on the 9 array discs. These array patterns were the core of the array discs. There were many kinds of array patterns, including offensive array patterns, defensive array patterns, illusion array patterns, and so on. With these array patterns, the array discs only needed to chant the incantation to arrange different kinds of arrays in an instant. The beast bone array discs were definitely the most powerful array discs Zhuowen had ever seen, and also the most useful array discs. When he was carving the array patterns, he could clearly feel that the power of the array patterns had been greatly enhanced by the beast bones. With these 9 beast bone array discs, Zhuowen could instantly set up a powerful level 7 grand array. Moreover, it would be at the peak of level 7 grand array. Even in the outside world, it was extremely terrifying and rare to see someone who could instantly set up a peak grade 7 grade array. In the bone world, where most of the cultivators could not use their divine power, Zhuowen felt that it would be difficult for anyone to withstand the power of a level 7 array. After refining the 9 beast bone array discs, Zhuowen spent another 10 days to refine another 9 beast bone array discs. These 9 beast bone array discs were used as backups. After all, as the array disc was continuously used, its energy would be constantly consumed, and it would eventually be completely scrapped. There was also the possibility that it would encounter a powerful attack and be damaged. Therefore, array discs always needed backup. This was Zhuowen's experience over the years. Inside his spirit ring, there were quite a few formation discs. However, the best formation disc in his spiritual ring was far inferior to this beast bone formation disc. Moreover, after refining the beast bone array discs, Zhuowen realized that Devour's inner world no longer rejected them. Thus, he stored the array discs in his inner world. At the same time, he also refined most of the middle-grade beast bones into beast bone array discs and stored them all in his inner world. He only kept about 500 middle-grade beast bones, which he planned to use in the Bone Halberd tribe. Let's go to the Bone Halberd tribe. Miss Lin, you lead the way. Zhuowen stood up, waved his sleeve, and opened the array around them. He then spoke to Lin Sheeping, who was sitting cross-legged not far from him. Lin Sheeping quickly nodded, and then led Zhuowen away from this place. The two of them passed through the Bone Forest, Bone Mountain, Plain, and Graveyard. After walking for 10 days, they finally arrived at the Bone Halberd tribe. The Bone Halberd tribe was located in the hinterland of the Bone Mountain Range. The mountain range overlapped, and the blood mist lingered, revealing a strange aura. Zhuowen was sharp enough to realize that the blood mist outside the mountain range should have been arranged by someone. He could see the traces of an array in the blood mist. Someone must have arranged a restriction in the blood mist, and it was likely to be some kind of spying array. Once they entered the blood mist, they would be under the spying eyes of the person who had arranged the array. The Bone Halberd tribe is located in the hinterland of the mountain range. Ordinary people don't know its exact location. We can only find the mountain guard. Lin Shiping explained. Soon after, she arrived before a stone tablet that stood in front of the mountain range. This stone tablet glowed with a bright red color, and there were no words on it. Lin Shiping took out a low-grade beast bone and placed it in the groove in the middle of the stone tablet. Then, the groove corroded and swallowed the beast bone. Thump, thump. After the beast bone was swallowed by the stone tablet, the sound of footsteps came from the blood mist in front of them. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and found that the one walking out of the blood mist was a girl in a blood-red dress. The girl's lips were as red as blood, and her beautiful eyes flashed with a scarlet light. Her body had a wild and strange beauty. Are you here to join the Bone Halberd tribe? The girl in the blood-red dress looked at Zhuowen and Lin Shiping with her beautiful eyes and asked with a bell-like laugh. Yes. Lin Shiping cupped her hands and said. The girl in the blood-red dress spread her jade-like hands and said with a murderous intent, You know the rules, right? 300 mid-grade beast bones, and I can recommend you to join the Bone Halberd tribe. Of course, if you can't take it out, don't leave here today. Lin Shiping said she didn't dare, and then carefully untied the leather bag at her waist and handed it to the girl in the blood-red dress, saying, My lady, there are 300 mid-grade beast bones in here. Please check them. The girl in the blood-red dress took the leather bag, opened it, and looked at it for a while. Then she carried it on her shoulder and said lightly, Yes, there are indeed 300 mid-grade beast bones. Now follow me. After saying that, the girl in the blood-red dress entered the blood mist. Lin Shiping and Zhuowen quickly followed, and their figures soon disappeared in the blood mist. The girl in the blood-red dress led Zhuowen and Lin Shiping across the Bone Mountains. After walking for about half a day, they arrived in front of a huge valley. On both sides of the valley, there were tall and majestic bone mountains that reached into the sky. The blood mist here had long disappeared, and Zhuowen could clearly see the scene in the valley. In the valley, buildings made of strange beast skulls were densely arranged, layer upon layer, and row upon row. Between these bone buildings, there was an endless stream of people. It could be said that the population in the valley was definitely the largest that Zhuowen had seen in the skeleton world. The Python tribe was considered to be densely populated in the bone forest, but compared to this valley, it paled in comparison. It was not even worth mentioning. At the entrance of the valley, 2 big men with bone halberds were guarding. When the 2 big men saw the girl in the blood-red dress, they both showed respect and bowed slightly to the girl. You 2 wait here. I need to go to the tribe to ask for instructions. Chapter 2185. Yuxiahui, the 2 burly men crossed their bone halberds and blocked Zhuowen and Lin Shiping. Zhuowen and Lin Shiping did not have to wait for long before the girl in the blood-red dress walked out of the valley. Behind her was a middle-aged man with a green pattern on his face. The middle-aged man wore a bone hat and held a bone staff. His eyes were narrow and cold. Obviously, he was not a friendly person. The middle-aged man sized up Zhuowen and Lin Shiping. Soon after, he raised the bone staff in his hand. Soon after, Zhuowen saw that the small skull at the top of the bone staff was actually emitting a green glow. The green light enveloped Zhuowen and Lin Shiping, and Zhuowen felt like he was being watched. Zhuowen was surprised. The green light had the aura of divine power. This man could use divine power. Wasn't it said that divine power could not be used in the bone world? Although Zhuowen had many secrets, his spirit ring had been taken by the black-clothed Zhuowen and brought into the Tsanglan secret territory. The Tsanglan secret territory was an independent small world. It was impossible for the middle-aged man to find out about the Tsanglan secret territory with the green light. The green light repeatedly scanned the 2 of them before withdrawing. The middle-aged man said with deep meaning, "Not bad, not bad." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He knew what the middle-aged man meant. The middle-aged man must have found out about the 200 mid-grade beast bones in his body. Zhuowen had obtained thousands of beast bones. He had refined all the high-grade beast bones into array discs and some mid-grade beast bones into array discs. He only had about 500 beast bones left. Lin Sheeping had more than 300 beast bones. After giving them to the girl in the blood-red dress, they still had about 200 mid-grade beast bones. "Old Tao, are they okay?" The girl in the blood-red dress asked the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man called Elder Tao shook his head and said, "No problem. Bring them in." The girl nodded. Then she said to Zhuowen and Lin Sheeping, "Come with me. I'll arrange a place for you to stay." Old Tao frowned slightly as he watched Zhuowen and Lin Sheeping leave. He took another look at Zhuowen's back. He had a feeling that this person was not simple. Previously, when he used the green light to investigate this kid, he actually felt his heart palpitate. It was as if there was a terrifying, strange beast inside this kid's body that was staring at him. Maybe it's just my imagination. Old Tao shook his head and left the entrance of the valley. Along the way, Zhuowen discovered that the Bone Halberd tribe was indeed bustling with noise and excitement. Although there were many people here, they were in an orderly manner. Many of the people walking on the road were chatting and laughing, appearing joyous and harmonious. Without a doubt, compared to the outside world, the Bone Halberd tribe's environment was like heaven and hell. The people in the outside world were all deceitful and deceitful. Even the people in the tribe did not trust each other. It was impossible to see a smile on anyone's face outside. On the contrary, in the Bone Halberd tribe, one could hear laughter from time to time. It was as if the people here did not doubt each other or deceive each other. "Is this the Bone Halberd tribe?" Lin Sheeping's beautiful eyes were filled with excitement. She also felt the atmosphere inside. She had never experienced such an atmosphere since she entered the bone world. "Yes, this is the Bone Halberd tribe. It's a big family. Now that you've joined the Bone Halberd tribe, you'll be part of this big family from now on." The girl in the blood-red dress, who was leading the way, turned around. Her beautiful eyes were no longer as cold as before. Instead, they were filled with enthusiasm. She smiled and continued, "I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Yu Xiahui. I'm the guardian of the Bone Halberd mountain range. I'm Lin Sheeping. He's Zhuowen. Big brother Zhua. Miss you? You scared me at first. I thought the Bone Halberd tribe was the same as the outside world, a place where people talk with their fists. Now that I think about it, I've misjudged you." Lin Sheeping said uneasily. Yu Xiahui did not care at all. She said, "Miss Lin, you probably don't know that the Bone Halberd tribe is the largest tribe in the bone world. There are many people who want to join the tribe. However, the Bone Halberd tribe is only so big. How can it fit everyone in the bone world? Only friends who sincerely want to join our Bone Halberd tribe will be treated as family. However, if they are our enemies, we will punish them severely. We will not be nice to them." Lin Sheeping nodded to show that she understood. "This is your residence." "Oh, right. Everything here needs to be purchased, and beast bones are the currency in circulation here. If you lack anything, you can tell me, and I'll take you to buy what you need." Yu Xiahui took Zhuowen and Lin Sheeping to the east of the Bone Halberd tribe. There was a small, remote skull cave. She said a few words and then planned to leave. "Miss you, wait." Zhuowen stopped Yu Xiahui. The latter stopped and looked at Zhuowen in surprise. She asked, Brother Zhua, what's the matter?" Zhuowen walked forward, took out a mid-quality beast bone, and handed it to Yu Xiahui. He said in a low voice, "Can I ask you a few questions?" Yu Xiahui's beautiful eyes brightened. She put away the mid-quality beast bone, naturally, and smiled. Brother Joie, just ask. As long as I know, I will tell you everything. Juoan said in a low voice, where does the chief of the Bone Halberd tribe live? And can your chief really communicate with the king of the bone world? Yu Xiahue looked Joie, went up and down, but still explained, as for the chief, he lives in the chief's hall in the center of the tribe. Moreover, he does have the ability to communicate with the king, and he also has extraordinary strength. It is said that the king gave him this ability. Then can we really meet the king at the end of the corpse heaven road? Zhuowen's tone became serious as he asked. Yu Xiaohui raised her beautiful eyes and said, why do you ask this? You want to go to the corpse heaven road? I'm warning you that the corpse heaven road is a forbidden area of the tribe. The chief has never opened it to others. Zhuowen waved his hand and said with a smile, I'm afraid Miss Yu has misunderstood. I don't have a long life. People die on the corpse heaven road. I've always been curious about the corpse heaven road and the king. Now that I've come to the Bone Halberd tribe, I naturally want to ask more. Yu Xiaohui curled her lips and said, I'm not sure if we can meet the king, but there should be some basis for it, because the king did appear once on the corpse heaven road. That's why there are rumors that you can meet the king at the end of the corpse heaven road. I see. Thank you, Miss Yu. Zhuowen nodded and clasped his hands at Yu Xiaohui. Then he turned and entered the skull cave arranged by Yu Xiaohui. However, when Zhuowen turned around, he didn't see the faint smile on Yu Xiaohui's face. She stuck out her small red tongue and licked her blood-red lips as if she had seen her favorite food. Entering the skull cave, Lin Sheeping was already tidying up inside. Seeing Zhuowen come in, Lin Sheeping's pretty face blushed. She said embarrassedly, Big brother Joie, this cave is a little small, so there's only one bed inside. Before, Lin Sheeping had always called Zhuowen Sr. Later, Zhuowen asked her to change it to Big Brother Joie. Chapter 2186. Illusion Array. Brother Joie, what's wrong? Did something happen? Lin Sheeping asked, worriedly, when she saw the strange expression on Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen shook his head and said in a low voice, Miss Lin, you can sleep on that bed. I'll sleep on the floor below. Don't leave this cave for the next 3 days. You understand? Lin Sheeping's beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. Zhuowen's serious attitude made her realize that something was wrong. However, she did not ask any further and only nodded her head. Along the way, Lin Sheeping had thoroughly witnessed how powerful Zhuowen was. In the Bone Halberd tribe, she could only rely on the white-clothed young man in front of her. She knew that Zhuowen wouldn't harm her. Zhuowen took out 50 middle-grade beast bones and arranged them at the entrance of the cave to set up a powerful defense array. Behind the defense array, Zhuowen took out another 50 middle-grade beast bones and set up a trap and kill array. Zhuowen set up the trap and kill array very carefully. After an hour, he set up a level 5 trap and kill array. Such a trap and kill array was considered very powerful in the bone world. If anyone dared to break into this trap and kill array, Zhuowen believed that very few people could get out alive. I'll go out for a while. You stay here and wait for me to come back, Zhuowen told Lin Sheeping. Then he opened the array and left the cave. Walking out of the cave, Zhuowen walked casually on the streets of the Bone Halberd tribe. Occasionally, he would see something that he liked on the street. He would haggle for a while and finally take out beast bones to buy the item with a painful expression. Just like that, Zhuowen strolled on the streets for almost half a day. Finally, he came to the entrance of an alley. His eyes were gloomy to the extreme. Is it really an illusion array? And the level of this illusion array is very high. Even I didn't notice it at first. Zhuowen walked into the alley casually, but his heart gradually sank. In fact, when he entered the Bone Halberd tribe, he had already noticed that something was wrong. Because, in his opinion, the expressions of the people on the streets of the Bone Halberd tribe were too peaceful. There wasn't even the slightest hint of hostility. Logically speaking, in such a perilous skeleton world, it was impossible for the people who lived here to not have any hostility. Previously, he was only guessing. Later, when he came out alone and pretended to be shopping, he carefully observed everyone on the street. He knew that his guess was basically correct. With his observation skills, he instantly discovered that the smiles of the people on the street were almost exactly the same. Of course, this kind of smile would not be discovered if one did not observe carefully. Most people would not pay special attention to other people's smiles. After all, a smile was the easiest way to numb others and give others a good impression. Who would care if your smile was the same? Although Zhuowen knew that this was an illusion array, he looked around. Other than the smiles on the faces of the people on the street, he really couldn't find anything suspicious. Everything was too real. Zhuowen pretended to be strolling on the street for a while. When he didn't find anything, he returned home. At the entrance of a deep alley, two figures crossed their arms and leaned against the wall on both sides. If Zhuowen was here, he would naturally recognize these two people. Weren't they the girl in the blood-red dress, Yu Xiaohui, and Elder Tao, who was holding the bone staff? Did this kid discover something? Old Tao frowned slightly and asked. Yu Xiaohui's beautiful eyes flashed with scarlet light. She shook her head and said, uncertainly, I'm not sure. This person was just casually strolling. I couldn't find anything suspicious. Elder Tao nodded. He did not find anything suspicious, but he felt that Zhuowen might have noticed something. Elder Tao, why did Father suddenly pay so much attention to this person? Could it be that this person has some secret? Even the 9-cycle samsara formation was activated. This is unbelievable. Yu Xiaohui frowned and said. Elder Tao's eyes flickered as he smiled bitterly. I'm not too sure either. I heard that this person is wanted by the chief's old friend. As for why he would mobilize so many people, I'm also quite puzzled. After returning to the cave, Zhuowen stayed in the cave for 3 days. Lin Shiping, on the other hand, stayed in the cave except for going out to purchase supplies. 3 days later, there was a knock on the door of the cave. Zhuowen opened the array and saw Yu Xiaohui's smiling face. Miss Yu, what's the matter? Zhuowen asked with a flicker in his eyes. Yu Xiaohui smiled and said, the chief wants to see you. Are you going? Zhuowen said without hesitation, yes. Lin Shiping wanted to say something, but after seeing Zhuowen's eyes, she swallowed her words. She knew that Zhuowen wouldn't act rashly. Then come with me. Miss Lin, wait at home. The smile in Yu Xiaohui's eyes grew wider. She spread her jade-like hands forward and made an inviting gesture. Zhuowen instructed Lin Shiping and followed Yu Xiaohui out of the cave. Although Zhuowen was puzzled that the chief suddenly wanted to see him, he knew that he couldn't refuse this invitation. His purpose in coming to the Bone Halberd tribe was for the corpse path to heaven. The corpse path to heaven was under the control of the Bone Halberd tribe's chieftain Wu Ling. Therefore, if he wanted to enter the corpse path to heaven, he had to come into contact with the chieftain. Of course, Zhuowen didn't think that his performance was special, but the chief wanted to see him. This made Zhuowen smell something unusual. Brother Zhua, you must be wondering why the chief suddenly wants to see you, right? Yu Xiaohui walked in front and said casually. Zhuowen didn't answer. Obviously, he was waiting for Yu Xiaohui to continue. Actually, it's like this. When old Tao was at the entrance of the valley, he used his bone staff to check the two of you. He found that the two of you actually had more than 500 mid-tier beast bones. Such a large number of mid-tier beast bones is really rare. Yu Xiaohui continued. Normally, only the big tribes in the bone realm can take out so many beast bones, but you only have 2 people and you can take out so many beast bones. So the chief thinks you are extraordinary, so he wants to meet you. Zhuowen laughed and showed a flattered expression. He cupped his hands and said, "Then Zhuowen is really honored. It seems that this matter can't be hidden from the Bone Halberd tribe. Actually, it's like this. Naturally, these beast bones don't belong to me alone. My friend and I happened to encounter 2 large tribes fighting. We took advantage of the time when the 2 tribes were fighting and secretly stole the beast bones from the 2 tribes. That's why there are so many of them." Yu Xiaohui's beautiful eyes revealed a look of understanding. She smiled tenderly and said, "Then your luck is really not ordinary. Generally, big tribes rarely fight with each other. Unexpectedly, you encountered one and even picked up a loophole." Chapter 2187. Si Lingyu Xiaohui nodded and didn't ask any more questions. She just focused on leading the way. Zhuowen's heart gradually became gloomy. From Yu Xiaohui's tone, he could tell that she didn't care about his opinion at all. Then, the 2 of them were silent along the way. The atmosphere was quite oppressive. Suddenly, Yu Xiaohui stopped in front of a huge skull cave in the center of the Bone Halberd tribe. The skull cave covered a large area. From its size, it could be seen that this skull cave was made up of several giant skulls. Around the cave, there were several teams of guards patrolling. It looked very strict. "Master Yu." When Yu Xiaohui walked past, the patrolling guards all bowed respectfully. It could be seen that Yu Xiaohui's position in the Bone Halberd tribe wasn't low. Yu Xiaohui was expressionless. She came to the entrance of the cave and knocked on the bone wall. The restriction at the entrance of the cave slowly disappeared. "Let's go in." Yu Xiaohui turned around and smiled at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes twinkled. He nodded, and the 2 of them entered the cave one after the other. The inside of this skull cave was extremely large. Bonfires were lit all around, making the dark environment extremely bright. At the end of the bonfires, there was a carpet piled with many skulls. The carpet was quite long and stretched to the deepest part of the cave. Zhuowen saw that there was a huge throne made of bones in the depths of the cave. An old man sat on the throne, looking down at Zhuowen and Yu Xiaohui. The old man was wearing a ferocious armor made of bones. On his head, there was a skull of a strange beast. There were several bone knives at his waist, shining with cold light. His eyes were like torches, and he had a dignified temperament. Zhuowen knew that the old man should be the chief of the Bone Halberd tribe. "Si Ling, chief, I have brought Zhuowen here." Yu Xiaohui bowed and said respectfully. Si Ling nodded. Soon after, he looked at Zhuowen and said with a smile, "Very good. I can see that you're quite young, but you're actually able to possess more than 500 mid-tier beast bones. You must be extraordinary. Can you tell me how you obtained so many beast bones?" The undead spirit looked amiable, but Zhuowen sneered in his heart. This undead spirit was trying to trick him. However, Zhuowen had already prepared an excuse. He repeated what he had said to Yu Xiaohui earlier. The dead soul nodded, as if he didn't doubt Zhuowen's words at all. He just sighed and said, "You were lucky enough to encounter the conflict between the 2 tribes. Moreover, you were able to take advantage of the conflict between the 2 tribes and steal all the beast bones of the 2 tribes. You must be extraordinary. How about this? I think you are also a talent. Are you interested in becoming my personal guard?" Before Zhuowen could speak, Yu Xiaohui beside him said in surprise, Brother Zhua, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Chief has never recruited a personal guard. You must seize this opportunity." Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy, but he shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Chief. Actually, I didn't come to the Bone Halberd tribe today to join you." The dead soul squinted and said indifferently, "Oh, then why did you come here?" "The Corpse Heaven Road. I have crazy respect for the king of the bone world. I want to go to the Corpse Heaven Road to see that king," Zhuowen said in a low voice. Yu Xiaohui, who was standing next to Zhuowen, suddenly kept quiet out of fear. She looked at Zhuowen strangely. The Corpse Heaven Road was the forbidden area of the Bone Halberd tribe. This was known to all. Moreover, the Corpse Heaven Road had been controlled by Chief Sealing of the Bone Halberd tribe for so many years. Except for the dead soul, no one else had ever entered the Corpse Heaven Road. It wasn't that other people didn't want to enter, but that they couldn't get the permission of the dead soul. In Yu Xiaohui's view, Zhuowen's proposal was simply a waste of breath, and it would even anger the dead soul. However, to Yu Xiaohui's surprise, the dead soul just smiled and said without the slightest anger, "You want to enter the Corpse Heaven Road? You should know that the Corpse Heaven Road is very dangerous. There won't be any good results if you go in." Zhuowen didn't say anything and just looked at the dead soul silently. The smile on the dead soul's face became wider. He nodded and said, "If you really want to enter the Corpse Heaven Road, then I can agree to your request." Yu Xiaohui was dumbfounded. When did their chief become so easy to talk to? He actually agreed to let Zhuowen enter the Corpse Heaven Road so easily. Zhuowen was also a little surprised. He had heard a little about the Corpse Heaven Road. He knew that the Corpse Heaven Road was the forbidden area of the Bone Halberd tribe. Since it was a forbidden area, then it was definitely impossible for people to casually enter. However, this undead spirit had agreed too readily. "I think Chief has a condition, right?" Zhuowen said in a deep voice. However, the dead soul laughed and said, "You're right. The Corpse Heaven Road is the forbidden area of the Bone Halberd tribe. Not just anyone can enter. Actually, the condition is very simple." As he spoke, the dead soul took out a dim yellow parchment from the gap under the throne and threw it to Zhuowen. Zhuowen opened it and found that the map was winding like a mountain road. It was extremely complicated, and there weren't even any markings inside. On the back of the map, there was a strange flower drawn. This flower was about the size of 3 palms, and these petals were not normal petals but the heads of babies. Each head was only about half the size of a palm, and there were a total of 7 such petals. As for the branches below the flower, they were segmented like white spines. This map records a place called the Myriad Head Cave in the middle of the Corpse Heaven Road. In this Myriad Head Cave, there is something called the 7-headed bone flower. I need you to enter the Myriad Head Cave and retrieve the 7-headed bone flower." The dead soul said indifferently. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said, "This Myriad Head Cave should be very dangerous, right?" Zhuowen knew that since the chief didn't go in himself and instead let him in, this Myriad Head Cave was definitely not a good place. The Corpse Heaven Road is not a good place. If you feel that my condition is inappropriate, you don't have to agree. I won't force you." The dead soul leaned on the throne and said unhurriedly. Zhuowen frowned. In fact, with his current strength, he wasn't particularly worried about entering the Corpse Heaven Road. However, it was impossible for him to agree immediately. After all, if he agreed too quickly, it would easily arouse the dead soul's suspicion. After pretending to be conflicted for a long time, Zhuowen said cautiously, "Then do you want to send some people to me? Since the Corpse Heaven Road is so dangerous, it might be difficult for me to reach the Myriad Head Cave by myself." "Don't worry, I was the one who asked you to enter the Myriad Head Cave, so I will naturally send people over. However, after passing through the Myriad Head Cave, my people will take the things I want and return the way they came. If you want to pass through the Corpse Heaven Road, You can only rely on yourself." The dead soul said indifferently, "Sure." Zhuowen let out a light breath, his eyes revealing a look of relief. The dead soul nodded slightly in his heart, but did not suspect anything. The opening of the corpse, Heaven Road, requires the opening of the altar. Come back to me in 3 days. At that time, I will open the corpse Heaven Road, and I will arrange for the people. Now you can leave." The dead soul waved his hand and ordered him to leave. Zhuowen naturally didn't plan to stay any longer. He had already achieved his goal. Chapter 2188. 10,000 Heads Cave. 3 days later, Zhuowen came to Undead's cave as promised. After waiting outside for a while, he saw Undead leading a group of people out. "Let's go. To open the corpse path, we need to communicate with King first. Come with me." After Undead said this, he led the way to the east, where there was an incomparably huge square. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Before he left the cave today, he had already instructed Lin Shiping not to leave the cave before he returned. At the same time, he had set up a powerful defensive formation and a death trap array at the entrance of the cave. In his opinion, there shouldn't be anyone in the Bone Halberd tribe who could break through the formation he had set up at the entrance of the cave. The reason why he was so cautious was mainly because he couldn't see through the Bone Halberd tribe and its chief, Undead. The square was surrounded by bone pillars, and the central bone pillar was the thickest. On the surface of the bone pillar, there were strange patterns carved on it, making it look exceptionally strange. The square was very deserted. There was only Undead, his group, Zhuowen, and Yu Xiaohui's group with Zhuowen. "Zhuowen, these are the people I arranged to enter the corpse path with you. They will escort you to the 10,000 Heads cave." Undead stood in front of the central bone pillar and turned around to look at Zhuowen, then pointed at the 9 people beside him. These 9 people were very young. Their upper bodies were bare, and they held bone swords, bone blades, and other weapons in their hands. However, Zhuowen keenly sensed that these 9 people's eyes were lifeless. Although they hid it very well, he could still see it with a single glance. The 9 people used the weapons in their hands to cut open a wound on their left palm. Blood slowly flowed out, and the 9 people came to the central bone pillar one by one, pressing their blood-stained left hand on the surface of the bone pillar. "Brother Zhua, little brother Zhua, this is a necessary step to enter the corpse path. You are no exception." Yu Xiaohui, who was standing beside Zhuowen, explained when she saw Zhuowen frown. She then handed a bone dagger to Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze flickered, and he could only follow the actions of those 9 people. He cut open his left hand, and then suddenly pressed his left hand onto the surface of the bone pillar, leaving his handprint on it. However, when Zhuowen's left hand came into contact with the bone pillar, his heart sank. This was because he clearly discovered that a mark had been deeply imprinted on his left hand. If he could use his divine sense, it wouldn't be difficult for him to get rid of this imprint. But now that he couldn't use his divine sense, even if he knew that the bone pillar had left an imprint on his body, it wouldn't help. Although Zhuowen had discovered this imprint, his expression did not change. Instead, he slowly retreated and calmly looked at the undead spirit. "Right now, I want to contact the great and unparalleled king. All of you take 10 steps back." The undead spirit said. Zhuowen and the others did as they were told. Immediately after, the undead spirit held the bone staff with both hands and chanted something. Immediately, the blood-red handprint on the surface of the bone pillar started to be absorbed by the bone pillar. Then, Zhuowen discovered that his heart felt as if it was being pinched by a large hand, and he actually felt a little uncomfortable. The undead knelt on one knee on the ground, his eyes filled with piety. Not long after, Zhuowen was surprised to discover that the bone pillar started to break apart, and then it started to reassemble in midair, forming a rather spacious bone ladder. At the same time, the bone pillars around the plaza also shattered and condensed on the central bone ladder. Then, the bone ladder grew taller and taller, and actually extended all the way to a solid rock wall in front of them. The rock wall also exploded into a passageway. This passageway was incomparably deep and bottomless. Let's go up. On the other side of this cliff is the corpse heavenly road. The undead spirit put away the bone staff and said indifferently. Zhuowen hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still stepped onto the bone ladder. As for the 9 people chosen by the undead spirit, they obediently followed behind Zhuowen. Remember to go to the Myriad Head Cave and obtain the 7-headed bone flower. The undead spirit said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded and continued to climb up the bone ladder, quickly entering the rock wall. After Zhuowen entered, the undead spirit's eyes slowly narrowed, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of coldness. At the same time, a slender figure walked over from the other side of the plaza. When this figure walked in, he discovered that it was an old man wearing a long robe. This old man looked like an immortal, but the robe on his body had some holes, making him look slightly comical. That Zhuowen has already entered the corpse heavenly road. Changsheng, what do you plan to do next? The undead spirit looked at the old man and laughed. If Zhuowen was here, he would definitely recognize this old man. Wasn't he Qin Changsheng from the Heaven and Earth sect who entered the spatial fault before him? Qin Changsheng looked at the undead spirit and laughed. Master, this is just a clown. In this corpse world, you are the king. Who can escape from your palm? It's just that back then, we were looking for you, thinking that I was dead. The undead spirit's lips curled up. Back then, I didn't have much time left. And at that time, I also knew that my cultivation could only reach the void sky 8 steps in this lifetime. There was no need to think about reaching the void sky 9 steps at all. So in order to survive, I could only try my best. And in this spatial fault, it didn't disappoint me. In this corpse world, I suppressed the king and seized the vitality from his body, so this old man can live until now. Now, Qin Shuangji is dead. The only one who is still alive is the undead spirit. Qin Changsheng looked at the undead spirit in front of him with a complicated expression. When he fell into the corpse world, he happened to fall outside the Bone Halberd tribe and was later brought into the tribe by Yu Xiaohui. The moment he saw the chief of the Bone Halberd tribe, Qin Changsheng recognized this person. Wasn't he the previous ancestor of the Heaven and Earth sect, Qin Shuangji? He was also Qin Changsheng's master. Millions of years ago, Qin Shuangji suddenly left the Heaven and Earth sect, and his whereabouts were unknown. But now, Qin Shuangji actually entered the corpse world in the spatial fault and lived until now. And Qin Shuangji inadvertently learned about the power of faith in the corpse world. At the beginning, he deliberately revealed that the corpse world had a supreme king, so that all the cultivators in the corpse world would believe in that king. And Qin Shuangji relied on the sacrificial altar of the Bone Halberd tribe to collect the power of faith, which became his new power. Relying on the power of faith, Qin Shuangji suppressed the king of the corpse world. Of course, Qin Shuangji didn't see the true face of the king, but he knew that the king should be seriously injured, and the Bone Halberd tribe wasn't established randomly. Chapter 2189, 7-headed bone flower with Qin Shuangji's cunning. He naturally guessed that the target of this sealed land must be the king of the bone world. Thus, Qin Shuangji painstakingly set up the 9-cycle reincarnation array here with his supreme level of array Dao. And this 9-cycle reincarnation array was not as simple as an illusion array. It was just a smokescreen. The true purpose of this 9-cycle reincarnation array was to combine with the sealed land here and extract the life force of the king inside the sealed land. Chun Xuanji originally did not have much lifespan left, but by absorbing the life force of the king extracted by the 9-cycle reincarnation array, his own lifespan was constantly increasing, and he had lived until now. Now, Chun Xuanji was relying on the power of faith and the life force of the king. In another sense, he was the true king of this place, and his strength was enough to destroy any cultivator in the bone world. Master, what kind of existence is the king? Chun Changsheng asked curiously. Undead shook her head and said, that king is trapped in the sealed area, and it's said that only by passing through the heavenly corpse path can one reach the interior of the sealed area. However, with my current strength, I can still reach the end of the heavenly corpse path, so I don't know exactly what that king is. Chun Changsheng was quite surprised. Obviously, he did not expect that even Si Ling did not know what the king was. Master, that Zhuowen and I have a death feud. You can't let him die so easily. Chun Changsheng said in a deep voice. Si Ling laughed and said, don't worry. In this bone world, divine sense and divine power cannot be used. That Zhuowen is at most stronger than an ordinary person, and the 9 people I sent can each fight against 100 people. After Zhuowen enters the 1,000-head cave and obtains the 7-headed bone flower, he will be tied up and brought back, and you can do whatever you want with him. Chun Changsheng asked in surprise, Master, didn't you say that the person who plucked the 7-headed bone flower would become an undead within 2 hours of plucking the flower? That Zhuowen will definitely die, so why tie him up and bring him back? However, the undead spirit said indifferently, didn't you say before that this child has a clone? Even if the main body dies, doesn't he still have a clone? I'll let you vent your anger on my clone, then. Chun Changsheng cupped his fists and smiled. Thank you, Master. Also, I wonder if Master has found Fu Yuze? The undead said indifferently that Fu Yuz is said to have died in a small tribe in the south. You newcomers are usually proud and arrogant, so you definitely can't stand the contempt and disdain of others. That Fu Yuz probably didn't recognize his own position, so he clashed with others and was killed by others. Chun Changsheng wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Although he and Fu Yuz were both big shots in the outside world, their strength was unparalleled. However, the bone world was too strange. It could actually restrain their divine power and shield their divine consciousness. Here, no matter how impressive or powerful you were in the outside world, everything was equal here. Fu Yuz could be considered as unlucky. He was a great ancestor of the first generation, but he actually got into a conflict with a nobody in the bone world and was not killed. If this matter was spread to the outside world, he would become a laughing stock. At the same time, Chun Changsheng also rejoiced at his own luck. If he had not met the undead beforehand, it was very likely that he would have ended up in the same state as Fu Yuz. Zhuowen shuttled through the tunnel for more than an hour and finally walked out. On the other side of the tunnel was a world of bones. What appeared in front of him were piles of bones, which piled up into a few small hills. At the front of these bones was a huge abyss, and the front of the abyss was shrouded in clouds and mist. It was impossible to see what was on the other side. Master Zhua, let's continue forward. Although the 1,000-head cave is not far from here, there are many dangers along the way. We will protect you, so you can go ahead without worry. The 9 people following behind Zhuowen immediately dispersed and scattered around Zhuowen. They were always vigilant of the possible dangers around them. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. Although he did not know why the undead sent these 9 people, he knew that the undead did not have good intentions. Naturally, Zhuowen was not stupid enough to say it out loud. Instead, he took out the parchment map and looked at it while walking forward according to the directions on the map. On both sides of the abyss, there were several bone suspension bridges. Although the suspension bridges were not very stable, they were not a big problem for Zhuowen and the others. After crossing the suspension bridges, they arrived at another world of bones. After going through 3 or 4 worlds of bones, they finally stopped at the 5th world of bones. Looks like the 1,000-head cave is here. Zhuowen followed the markings on the map and stopped at the center of the 5th world of bones. On the left side of the continent, filled with bones, there was an incomparably huge cave. This cave was made up of countless skulls. These skulls belonged to both humans and beasts. Master Zhua, only you can enter the 1,000-head cave. We will wait outside. After you finish the 7-head bone flower, you can come out and hand it over to us. You can continue forward, but we need to return to report. Among the 9 people, a man wielding a saber said respectfully to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded and ignored the 9 people. Instead, he slowly walked into the 1,000-head cave. Zhuowen had never heard of the 7-head bone flower before. It was obviously a divine medicine unique to the bone world. Previously, he had asked the undead, and the latter had said that the 7-head bone flower had the effect of reviving the dead. Of course, this so-called dead person had to consume the 7-head bone flower within 2 hours of death. After 2 hours, even the 7-head bone flower would not bring the dead back to life. Without a doubt, this divine medicine was absolutely heaven-defying. Although the undead did not say what level of divine medicine the 7-head bone flower was, Zhuowen could imagine that it was definitely a level 9 divine medicine. Moreover, it was even more precious than the level 9 divine medicines he had obtained in the Luotian Palace. In this world, was there anything more important than life? The effect of reviving the dead was simply too heaven-defying. Although it could only be revived within 2 hours of death, it was already extremely heaven-defying. However, Zhuowen knew that the undead did not have any good intentions, so he had to be extra careful when entering the 1,000-head cave. Inside the 1,000-head cave, there was complete silence. It was so quiet that it was terrifying. The dark cave always gave people a feeling of infinite fear. Zhuowen took out the luminous stone that he had prepared and used it as a light as he continued to go deeper into the 1,000-head cave. How strange. Isn't this 1,000-head cave too quiet? Didn't the undead say that the corpse path to heaven was full of dangers? I've been here for so long, but I haven't even seen a single bird feather. Zhuowen muttered to himself. It was indeed as he had said. During the time they had been in the corpse path to heaven, their journey had been too smooth. There had been no danger at all. However, the more it was like this, the more vigilant Zhuowen became. After walking for about an hour, Zhuowen finally went deep into the cave. He saw that in the deepest part of the cave, there was a small circular pool. This small pool was only about 10 feet wide, and the pool water was pitch black. The pool was open air, so the light from outside shone in, making it look quite bright. Chapter 2190. Death Chi the flower had 7 petals, and each of the 7 petals was a baby's head with different expressions. Each head was half the size of a palm. Zhuowen knew that this strange flower was the 7-headed bone flower. When Zhuowen approached the pool, the 7-headed bone flowers in the center of the pool cast their gazes on Zhuowen. 7 pairs of eyes stared straight at Zhuowen, making Zhuowen's hair stand on end. Moreover, Zhuowen noticed that the 7 babies' eyes were emitting a dangerous light of greed. It was as if Zhuowen was the prey in the eyes of these 7 infant heads. Zhuowen stopped in his tracks, his eyes flickering. This 7-headed bone flower was too strange. Zhuowen couldn't make up his mind. That dead spirit suddenly asked me to enter the myriad-head cave to pick this 7-headed bone flower. There must be a problem. Zhuowen muttered to himself. Although he could refuse to pick the seven-headed bone flower, he knew very well that the 9 people outside the Myriad Head Cave would definitely make a move against him. Zhuowen had secretly observed those 9 people. They were definitely experts among experts in the bone world. If Zhuowen lost all of his divine power, facing those 9 people would be the same as courting death. However, Zhuowen didn't care about those 9 people. Zhuowen waved his sleeve, summoning the black-robed Zhuowen. The black-robed Zhuowen's right hand condensed the energy of extreme lightning in his palm, turning into a giant lightning hand that grabbed at the 7-headed bone flower in the middle of the pool. However, the instant the enormous hand formed by the extreme lightning energy reached the pond suddenly started to boil and soared into the sky. The enormous lightning hand was actually dispersed by the boiling water. A fishy stench filled the air as the water in the pool surged. Zhuowen immediately shielded his sense of smell. The stench was highly toxic. The moment he came into contact with the smell, he had already discovered that the smell was highly corrosive. Zhuowen's original body was hiding behind the black-clothed Zhuowen, relying on the black-clothed Zhuowen's extreme thunder energy to disperse the stench that permeated the air. Zhuowen's expression was ugly. He knew very well that if he were to enter the pool without thinking, he would be doomed. Just the stench alone was enough to poison him, not to mention the terrifying pool water. The black-clothed Zhuowen leaped into the air. Lightning and fire energies intertwined around his body, forming a lightning and fire domain-like defense as he rushed to the center of the pool. Crash! The pool water was like a troublesome water python, surging up and coiling around Zhuowen's entire body. However, the lightning and fire energies surrounding the black-clothed Zhuowen were like the sharpest blades in the world. The surging pool water was basically annihilated by the lightning and fire energies. When he reached the center of the pool, the 7 heads of the 7-headed bone flower all glared at Zhuowen, their eyes emitting a scarlet light. Immediately after, Zhuowen felt the gravity around him increase by hundreds or thousands of times, causing him to involuntarily fall into the pool water. Zhuowen knew very well that this strange pool water absolutely could not be touched. He immediately used his innate divine ability, Purgatory, and used its energy to resist the terrifying gravity of the pool water. While Purgatory blocked the gravity of the pool water, Zhuowen reached out with his right hand. His right hand was wrapped in an endless amount of lightning and fire energy, and he grabbed the root of the 7-headed bone flower. Roar! Roar! Strange roars came from the 7 heads of the 7-headed bone flower. Soon after, Zhuowen discovered that a strange death aura was actually coming from the inside of the 7-headed bone flower. It flowed along his arm and invaded his body. Zhuowen was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly put away the 7-headed bone flower and left the pool. However, his face was extremely gloomy because the death aura from the 7-headed bone flower was exceptionally difficult to deal with. At this moment, it was spreading along his 8 extraordinary meridians and spreading to his entire body. He knew very well that once this death aura spread to his entire body, his vitality would be completely devoured by this death aura. The energy used to strengthen the death aura would eventually be sucked dry of his vitality, and he would die. In order to pluck this 7-headed bone flower, one of us must be sacrificed. That undead's methods are really sinister. Zhuowen's heart sank to the bottom. Anyone who came into contact with this death aura would definitely die without a burial place. However, Devour's vitality was extremely strong, and he was able to control the death aura in his right arm in time. At the same time, Zhuowen used the power of the array to completely seal the connection between his right arm and his body. At this moment, the black-clothed Zhuowen's right arm was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it had turned into a shriveled, bony state. That's not right. This seven-headed bone flower is so dangerous. I might die before I even get close to it. Why is that undead so confident that I can obtain this seven-headed bone flower? Does he know that I have a doppelganger? Zhuo Wen thought back to the confident expression on the undead spirit's face before he left. Now that he thought about it, the undead spirit was too confident that Zhuo Wen would be able to obtain the seven-headed bone flower. Throwing away the random thoughts in his mind, Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered. Now that the black-clothed Zhuo Wen's right arm had been invaded by the death aura, it was equivalent to being completely crippled. Naturally, the black-clothed Zhuo Wen's strength had also been greatly weakened. Of course, this was not the main point. What Zhuo Wen was struggling with right now was how to get rid of the death aura in his right arm. Just now, he had tried all the methods on the black-clothed Zhuo Wen's body, but none of them could get rid of the death aura. Some methods even increased the power of the death aura, which scared Zhuo Wen so much that he didn't dare to try again. This isn't an ordinary death aura at all. Zhuo Wen sighed softly and carefully put away the seven-headed bone flower. After plucking the seven-headed bone flower, it had calmed down a lot. At this moment, the 7 infant heads were drooping, listless. I've been tricked by the undead. Since that's the case, I can't let go of this 7-headed bone flower. Zhuo Wen's eyes were dark. In order to pluck the 7-headed bone flower, his doppelganger's right arm had been crippled. Moreover, if he hadn't been vigilant and let his main body pluck the 7-headed bone flower, his main body might have fallen. After paying such a huge price, if Zhuo Wen still gave up the 7-headed bone flower, then he would be a fool. Zhuo Wen would be willing to give it up. Zhuo Wen made up his mind. He would definitely not reveal the 7-headed bone flower. He planned to hide this miraculous medicine that could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. After the black-clothed Zhuo Wen entered the Canglan's secret realm, Zhuo Wen hid the 7-headed bone flower and walked out of the myriad head cave. Because things from the bone world couldn't be stored in the Canglan's secret realm or the inner world, unless they were completely refined. Right now, Zhuo Wen didn't have the time to refine it, so he could only hide it on his body. After leaving the entrance of the myriad head cave, Zhuo Wen found that the 9 people were still guarding the entrance. Perhaps because they saw Zhuo Wen come out, the man in the lead held a bone blade and sized up Zhuo Wen. He said indifferently, "Did you get the 7-headed bone flower?" Zhuo Wen frowned slightly. This person's attitude made him very unhappy. He replied indifferently, "The 7-headed bone flower is too dangerous, so I didn't dare to take the risk. That's why I didn't pick it." "You didn't pick it? This is the chief's request. Do you dare to disobey?" Chapter 2191. Bone Latterzhuan looked at the 9 people and said coldly, "What? It's my freedom to pick the 7-headed bone flower. What does it have to do with you? If you want to show your loyalty, you can pick it yourself. Why do you want me to do it?" The 9 people looked at each other, and the leader sneered, "This is the chief's order. If he wants you to pick it, you have to pick it. Get in, or the sword has no eyes." Zhuo Wen's eyes darkened. This person dared to threaten him in public. He really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. "So what if I don't go?" Zhuo Wen calmed down and said indifferently, "I said, the sword has no eyes. Capture this kid and tie him up. Today, he has to go even if he doesn't want to." After the leader finished speaking, he rushed in front of Zhuo Wen. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed at Zhuo Wen's neck, not showing any mercy. Although this move was not fatal, it could lock the throat and make the enemy feel extremely uncomfortable. Zhuo Wen's eyes turned cold, and he stepped back with his right foot. However, the people behind him all drew their weapons and slashed at Zhuo Wen's back. Obviously, if Zhuowen really retreated, he would have to bear the brunt of their attacks. Zhuowen's eyes turned even colder, and he immediately summoned the black-clothed Zhuowen. The black-clothed Zhuowen waved his left hand, and the energy of extreme fire swept out. The weapons in the hands of the 9 people were all melted into nothingness, and they hurriedly retreated because of the high temperature. With the black-clothed Zhuowen's strength, killing these 9 people was easy, but Zhuowen knew that these 9 people were ordered by the dead spirit, so they didn't deserve to die. The 9 people were scared silly. They knew how hard the bone weapons were, but the black-clothed Zhuowen melted them in an instant. It was too terrifying. Scram! Zhuowen no longer paid any attention to these 9 people and continued forward. His purpose in entering the corpse heaven path was to see the king and leave this damned place. Naturally, he couldn't waste time here. Let's go and report to the chief. The man in the lead said, and immediately led the 8 people back the way they came. Zhuowen passed through the world of skeletons again, and what appeared in front of him was a sky-reaching bone ladder. This bone ladder was countless times more majestic than the one used to enter the path of bones. It could be said that this bone ladder was built from the bones of a general. Zhuowen hadn't even stepped onto the bone ladder yet, but he could already feel the mournful aura coming from it. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He could sense that this bone staircase wasn't simple. It might even be dangerous, so he put his true body away and let the black-robed Zhuowen come out. Now, only the black-clothed Zhuowen's strength wouldn't be suppressed. In this dangerous corpse, Heaven's Road, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't let his main body take the risk. Although Zhuowen hadn't encountered any danger since the beginning of the journey to Myriad Head Cave, he knew that it was because of the undead. This undead gave Zhuowen a sense of mystery that he couldn't see through. To be more precise, it was a sense of crisis. The following road should be completely out of the undead's control. It would definitely be full of danger. The moment he stepped on the bone ladder, Zhuowen immediately felt a heavy pressure pressing down on his body. Phew! Fortunately, I put my true body away. Such a terrifying pressure. My true body can't stand it. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. This pressure was definitely not something an ordinary person could bear. His true body, which had lost its divine power, would definitely be seriously injured under this pressure. Walking up step by step, Zhuowen's pace was extremely steady. When Zhuowen stepped onto the real corpse heaven path, the 9 people had already returned to the Bone Halberd tribe along the original path. What about Zhuowen? In the square, the undead looked at the 9 people with gloomy eyes and asked coldly. The 9 of them kept quiet out of fear. The man in the lead knelt on the ground and hurriedly said, "My lord, that Zhuowen is too terrifying. He can use divine power, especially the flames he released. He turned all of our weapons into ashes." Divine power? Are you serious? The undead opened his eyes wide, his face full of disbelief. In the bone world, no one could use divine power. This was common knowledge for everyone in the bone world. Even he, the undead, could only rely on the power of faith to obtain great power. He didn't have any divine power. Chun Changsheng was even more surprised. He thought to himself, "Fortunately, I didn't expose myself. If that Zhuowen could really use divine power, I would have been in danger. But how did he do it?" The undead snorted coldly and waved the bone staff at the man in the lead. The man in the lead immediately felt as if he was choking. He covered his neck with both hands and floated in the air. His face was incomparably red. "You're lying, right? It's impossible to use divine power in the bone world. It should be because you didn't do your job well that you made up such a lie." The undead said coldly. The man kept shaking his head, indicating that he didn't lie. Unfortunately, the undead was indifferent. He waved his right hand and the man screamed and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The remaining 8 people knelt on the ground, trembling. They didn't dare to raise their heads to look at the undead. "Tell me what happened." The undead looked at the 8 people and asked. The 8 people hurried to explain. They didn't dare to say that Zhuowen had divine power anymore. They just said that Zhuowen escaped and put all the blame on the man who was killed. "The 8 of you will stay in the cage for 3 days. The undead said indifferently. The expressions of the 8 people changed greatly, but they didn't dare to refute or beg for mercy. There were many undead beasts in this beast cage. Their chances of survival were slim, but it wasn't impossible. At least, it was much better than being killed on the spot. After the 8 people were taken away, Chen Changsheng said, "Master, that man didn't look like he was lying." The undead interrupted. "You don't need to say more. I've lived in the bone world for so long. I know very well that divine power doesn't exist in this place. However, Zhuowen might have other powers." Chen Changsheng was enlightened. He knew that the undead should know that the man didn't say anything, but he still killed him. He didn't want to cause panic in the tribe because of him. Just think about it. If there was a special case in the skeleton world that could use divine power, how big of a disaster would that be? Very few people in the skeleton world could resist such an existence. Let's wait first. It's basically impossible to pass through the corpse heavenly road. That Zhuowen either died in the corpse heavenly road, or he's afraid of going back the way he came and being captured by us. The dead spirit said indifferently. Chen Changsheng nodded and didn't say anything. He was worried and complicated. Back then, Zhuowen was just an ant in his eyes. He could crush him with one finger. Chen Changsheng didn't expect that he would be forced to such a state. Even though Zhuowen couldn't use his divine power in the skeleton world, he was still hiding some unknown power. Chen Changsheng recalled all the scenes when he met Zhuowen. He realized that he was led by the nose by the boy who was once an ant. Maybe I shouldn't have listened to Ling Binbing and went to kill Zhuowen. The heaven and earth sect wouldn't have been destroyed, and I wouldn't have ended up like this. Chen Changsheng muttered to himself. He secretly looked at the undead beside him. He didn't dare to tell the undead that the heaven and earth sect was destroyed. Chapter 2192. Same race roar. 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 On the corpse heavenly road, in front of the huge bone ladder, a series of flickering figures appeared. Zhuowen stopped, and his eyes became extremely solemn. He had been on the bone ladder for 3 days. The first 3 days were fine. Except for the doubling of gravity, there were no other dangers on the bone ladder. But today, the undead appeared in front of the bone ladder, and their numbers were increasing. Zhuowen made a grasping motion with his left hand and condensed a divine sword of thunder and fire. Under the control of Zhuowen's mind, the Thunderfire Divine Sword began to split into extreme fire swords and extreme thunder swords. The 2 kinds of divine swords were densely packed around Zhuowen's body. After doing this, Zhuowen moved forward step by step, turning a blind eye to the undead that appeared in front of him. Bang! 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 As Zhuowen continued to move forward, the surrounding densely packed extreme Dao divine swords revealed a terrifying might. They danced in the sky, and all the undead that approached Zhuowen were pierced and annihilated by the extreme Dao divine swords. Zhuowen climbed the bone ladder unimpeded. His speed was not fast, but it was as steady as a mountain. In this way, Zhuowen walked on the bone ladder for another 10 days. He found that the number of undead had decreased, but he still hadn't reached the end of the bone ladder. Is there no end to this bone ladder? Zhuowen frowned slightly and murmured in a low voice. Another 5 days passed, and Zhuowen was still on the bone ladder. He couldn't see the end of the bone ladder, and the undead seemed to have disappeared without a trace, never to appear again. At this moment, Zhuowen found that it might be futile for him to continue walking. Zhuowen took a deep breath and sat cross-legged on the bone ladder, revealing a thoughtful look. The scarlet eyes that appeared in his mind and reminded him to go to the corpse heavenly road were definitely not groundless. Now that he had come to the corpse heavenly road, it didn't make sense for him to be trapped here. Maybe my method is wrong? Zhuowen frowned slightly. He recalled the scene when the pair of scarlet eyes appeared in his mind and slowly closed his eyes. About an hour later, a strange black fog began to appear around Zhuowen's body, completely concealing his figure. At this moment, the pair of scarlet eyes appeared in Zhuowen's mind once again. I've already arrived at the corpse heavenly road, but I can't find the exit. Tell me how to meet you. Zhuowen looked up at the pair of scarlet eyes and said calmly, "Reveal your true form and use your innate ability to devour to open the exit." The scarlet eyes only said this one sentence before slowly fading away and disappearing into the darkness. Zhuowen opened his eyes and looked at the blurry end of the bone ladder. His eyes were clear and bright. "Let's try it." As he spoke, Zhuowen roared towards the sky. Shortly after, his body began to grow taller and taller. His entire body had transformed into a terrifying giant beast. This giant beast was so massive that the bone ladder was nothing compared to it. It wasn't worth mentioning. After Devour had returned to his true form, he opened his mouth and spat out a black devouring vortex, a terrifying suction force that could swallow the sky, and the sea came from his mouth. Right after that, Zhuowen saw ripples appear at the end of the bone ladder. The originally blurry end gradually became much clearer at this moment. It was as if the end had been stained with dust before, and now that the dust had been absorbed, it became clearly visible. Zhuowen squinted. His right foot stomped, and Devour's giant body flew out, entering the end of the bone ladder easily. The moment Devour reached the end of the tunnel, invisible ripples arose fiercely like a stone falling into the water surface, sparkling in the light. On the other hand, Zhuowen only felt that the world was spinning. He felt dizzy and extremely uncomfortable. However, when he woke up, he found that he wasn't on the bone ladder anymore. It was a flat ground. At the front of the plain stood a majestic hall made of bones. Two giant skeletons of strange beasts stood on both sides of the hall, which looked majestic and magnificent. After Devour returned to his human form, Zhuowen became vigilant. He slowly walked to the hall in front of him. As soon as he entered the hall, he felt an ancient and vicissitude aura blowing at his face. What frightened Zhuowen more was that when the vicissitude aura hit him, Zhuowen found that the vitality in his body was gradually aging because of the resonance. Zhuowen was so scared that he immediately urged his lightning and fire energy to cover his entire body to control the influence of the aura. Just the aura alone was so terrifying, causing Zhuowen to become even more cautious. "Come in. Don't be so cautious." An old voice arose from the hall, echoing in Zhuowen's ears. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. Zhuowen's heart clenched, but he was hesitant. This bone hall was so strange. The people who could live in this hall weren't ordinary. Perhaps the owner of this voice was the king of the skeleton world. "Clansman, I think you've guessed my identity. Why are you still so afraid? Come in." The aged voice resounded once more, and its tone was filled with an indisputable tone. A pressure that caused Zhuowen's heart to tremble abruptly crushed down. This pressure was so intimidating that it made Zhuowen's heart beat fast. He had to force himself to enter the hall. Zhuowen's knowledge wasn't bad, but this pressure was beyond his expectation. It was much stronger than Old Ruthless. Although this pressure wasn't as strong as Great Brahma, it wasn't much different. Zhuowen knew that the owner of this voice wasn't a formidable existence at Void's Sky 9 steps, but he wasn't far from it. Moreover, from what this man had just said, he should be devour. He considered Zhuowen as one of his clansmen. Deep inside the hall there was nothing. Green flames were burning around, making the hall dark and gloomy. A chessboard was placed in an open space in the depths of the hall. A figure with disheveled hair was sitting at one end of the chessboard, seriously looking at the game on the chessboard. His brows were tightly knitted, as if he was thinking about how to break the game on the chessboard. Zhuowen stood on the other side of the chessboard, looking at the sloppy man in silence. However, he didn't say anything. "Come here, kid. Sit in front of me." The sloppy man waved his right hand, and a hassock appeared on the chessboard. The man lifted his head to look at Zhuowen, pointing at the hassock. However, when the man lifted his head, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. This was an extremely terrifying face. The surface of the face was covered with intersecting veins and blood vessels. Moreover, these veins were constantly wriggling like worms. It was very disgusting to look at. Zhuowen's willpower wasn't bad. However, as it was the first time he saw this face, he couldn't help but be surprised. Chapter 2193. The chessboard and the pieces the chain was black with a hint of golden light. It looked inconspicuous, but Zhuowen could tell that it was extraordinarily tough and terrifyingly tough. In particular, the man in front of him looked ordinary, but Zhuowen did not really treat him as an ordinary man. After all, the man's words earlier had affected him, so he was definitely not a simple person. At that moment, Zhuowen's attention was also on the chessboard. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces were arranged in a crisscrossing manner, like two black and white dragons. They were fighting with each other, and the situation was extremely delicate and intense. Although Zhuowen did not play chess much, he had seen others play chess before, so he knew a thing or two about the situation. In the game, on the surface, the black pieces had the upper hand and were forcing the white pieces to make a fool of themselves. The situation was very good. However, Zhuowen could tell that something was wrong. Although the white pieces seemed to be forced to retreat, and the situation was critical, they were still not taken down by the black pieces. Moreover, due to the black pieces' fierce attacks, their flaws were gradually revealed. It seemed like the black pieces had the upper hand, but in reality, the black pieces were in danger, and the situation was extremely delicate. The sloppy man held a black piece and looked at the chessboard with a smile. "Young one, you look like you know the art of chess too. I don't really understand. However, I can still understand the direction of the chess game," Zhuowen said indifferently. The sloppy man laughed and asked, "Young one, do you think winning or losing in a game of chess is important?" "I dare not judge whether it's important or not. Different people have different opinions on this matter, and no one can say for sure." Zhuowen shook his head. The sloppy man laughed heartily. He looked up and looked seriously at Zhuowen. "You're right. Winning or losing is different for everyone. Look at this game of chess. What do you see?" Zhuowen frowned. He looked at the chessboard in front of him seriously and said, "Life." The sloppy man was startled. Then he laughed and said, "Interesting. Your answer is really interesting. Tell me, what does this game of chess have to do with life?" Zhuowen, however, was neither happy nor sad. He said, "Senior, what good will it do for me if I tell you this?" The sloppy man's laughter grew louder and louder, not showing any anger at Zhuowen's words. He pointed at Zhuowen's withered right arm and said, "I can help you extract the death aura of the seven-headed bone flower." Zhuowen's gaze shook, and he hurriedly asked, "Is that true?" The sloppy man smiled and said, "Of course I'm serious. Now tell me, if I'm satisfied with what you say, How difficult would it be for me to help you dissolve the death aura? Zhuowen calmed the excitement in his heart. This death qi had troubled him all along the way. Moreover, he noticed that as time passed, the death qi became denser and denser, and it showed signs of breaking through the seal on his right arm. Zhuowen knew that if he didn't get rid of the death qi, it would really endanger his life. Now that he heard that this person could dissolve the death aura, how could Zhuowen not be excited? Zhuowen looked at the chessboard, thoughtfully. At the same time, he recalled everything that had happened since he started as a lowly person and cultivated step by step to his current level, and the light of understanding in his eyes grew thicker and thicker. Zhuowen was not old, but he had experienced a lot of things. He was probably comparable to those old monsters who had cultivated for countless years. Life is like a game of chess, and we are like chess pieces. Under the chessboard of heaven and earth, we walk a fixed path step by step. There are obstacles and difficulties, but the final result is victory or defeat. However, in my opinion, true victory or defeat is not the game of chess, but the victory that belongs to us. Some people win the game of chess, but lose their lives. Some people lose the game of chess, but win their lives. However, true victory is in our own hands, not submitting to fate, not being satisfied with the status quo, and constantly moving forward, stepping out of the universe with the body of an ant. That is true victory. Don't let drama disturb true feelings. Let fate decide, and I will win. After the battle, the two pieces are white and black. How can one lose? The true winner can leave the game of chess and truly control their own fate. Those who cannot control their own fate are still losers even if they win against the enemy in the game of chess. Zhuowen's voice grew louder and louder, like a great bell, enlightening even the deaf. The sloppy man's eyes shone brightly, but he laughed aloud. Not bad at all. Let fate decide, and I will win. That's a good thing. However, as a chess piece, do you really think you can control your own fate? The sloppy man suddenly asked in a deep voice. Zhuowen thought of the situation on the heavenly armor planet, the bet between Taiqing and Sakyamuni. In that bet, all the living beings on the heavenly armor planet, including Zhuowen, were chess pieces. However, Zhuowen still managed to control his own fate in the end. He rushed out of the heavenly armor planet and entered the boundless starry sky, cultivating to his current powerful cultivation. Yes, nothing is absolute in this world, Zhuowen said seriously. The sloppy man sank into deep thought. Before long, the sloppy man smiled. His entire presence changed as well. He seemed to have become more determined and confident. Young man, I'm very satisfied with what you said. There are some things that you need to stick to. Nothing is absolute, and there is no absolute victory or defeat. After the sloppy man said that with a smile, he quietly placed the black piece in his hand on the chessboard. The crisp sound produced by the chess pieces constantly reverberated in Zhuowen's ears. The entire chessboard shone with scorching white light. The gloomy interior of the hall glowed with new light. It was no longer as lifeless as before. Instead, it was filled with life. Zhuowen looked at the chessboard again. He discovered that the black piece had eaten the white piece's dragon, completely cutting off the white piece's chance to counterattack. Senior, who are you? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and asked the sloppy man. The sloppy man smiled. Haven't you guessed my identity? I think I made myself clear outside the hall, right? You're the king of the skeleton world. Zhuowen asked in a low voice. The sloppy man nodded, not denying it. Is your real body also Devour? Zhuowen asked again. The sloppy man smiled. To be exact, I'm not Devour. I'm King Devour, the Devour with the royal bloodline. Whether it's status or strength, I'm much higher than an ordinary Devour. King Devour, Zhuowen's eyes shrank. It was the first time he had heard about this so-called King Devour. However, he knew that this King Devour should be much stronger than Devour. You don't know anything about it? The sloppy man frowned, asking suspiciously. Zhuowen rubbed his nose awkwardly and said, Senior, I've been wandering in the starry sky since I was a child, so I don't know much. I hope you don't mind. Chapter 2194. Unknown secrets. Zhuowen's mind flickered. He thought that Devour had a clan, and this sloppy man called him King Devour. Was he the king of Devour's clan? However, if he was the king of Devour's clan, why did he appear in the skeleton world? From the looks of it, this Devourer king seemed to have been sealed here. Precursor, can you tell me more about the clan? Asked Zhuowen all of a sudden. Although Zhuowen's body was a human after he had possessed Devour, he had inherited some of Devour's emotions. Although the members of Devour's clan were cold, their emotions of returning to their roots were the same in every clan. Zhuowen's body controlled Devour. With Zhuowen's thoughts, of course, he wouldn't return to Devour's clan. However, it wasn't impossible for him to ask about Devour's clan. He also wanted to know what Devour's clan was like. The sloppy man sighed. I used to be the king of my clan. However, after I was replaced by a new king, I was expelled from the devouring world. That new king didn't let me go. He sealed me in this place. This skeleton world is my body. Zhuowen revealed a look of understanding. As the king of the devouring clan, this sloppy man's devouring power was definitely above all other devourers. This bone world was created by this devouring king. That was why this bone world could absorb divine power and deprive the cultivators who entered the bone world of their powers. I don't know much about the current situation of my clan. However, I can tell you about the things that happened when I was the king. The sloppy man looked like he was recalling the past. Then he began to tell Zhuowen everything about the devouring world. After the sloppy man finished, Zhuowen had a basic understanding of the devouring world. The devouring world was a small world. Of course, it was smaller than the 8 heavens. However, it was much more tenacious and secretive than the 8 heavens. Moreover, even King Devour didn't know Devour's exact location because the location of the devouring world wasn't fixed. It was said that the key to open the devouring world was Devour's blood essence. Devour wasn't strong enough, so he couldn't open the gate of the devouring world. Moreover, there weren't many Devours in the devouring world, but each of them was powerful and earth-shaking. Junior, your current strength isn't bad. However, opening the devouring world is still a bit difficult. Moreover, you haven't fully matured yet. I'm afraid it's not possible for you to return to the devouring world now. The sloppy man looked at Zhuowen, who was deep in thought, and reminded him faintly. Zhuowen nodded. From the sloppy man's words, he knew that Devour was as strong as an ordinary void Sky 9 Steps expert. In other words, his clone Devour needed to have the strength of a void Sky 9 Steps expert to open the devouring world. Of course, although Devour had a unique innate gift, not every Devour could cultivate to be that strong. In the devouring clan, as Devour could compare to Void Sky 9 times, he was absolutely an expert of the devouring clan. It was said that the Devour King was an existence that stood above all Devours. He was a terrifying existence that was closest to breaking through the heavens. Although the sloppy man's words were vague, Zhuowen caught some clues. It seemed that in the ancient times of the devouring clan, the strongest Devour King had appeared. The Devour King of that generation was said to have reached the supreme realm of breaking through the heavens. Of course, Zhuowen wanted to ask about the mighty Devour King. However, the sloppy man seemed to be afraid of something, so he kept his mouth shut. Senior, if the devouring clan is so strong, why didn't they invade the 8 heavens? Zhuowen asked all of a sudden. The sloppy man sneered and said, "Junior, you underestimate the 8 heavens too much. Heaven-breaking sources exist in the 8 heavens. These heaven-breaking sources don't appear casually. You mean that the human clan has a heaven-breaking expert? Why don't the 8 heavens have any records about it?" Zhuowen was surprised. The sloppy man said indifferently, "There has indeed been a heaven-breaking expert in the human clan. As for why the human clan doesn't have any records about it, I'm not too sure. However, I'm the Devour King of the previous generation, so I know the history of the Devour clan very well. In the ancient times, the devouring world was invaded by a heaven-breaking expert of the human clan. Because of this, the devouring clan suffered a great loss. This is the humiliation of the devouring clan. The records are very clear." Zhuowen was shocked. Since there had been a heaven-breaking expert in the human clan, why didn't he know anything about it? No one in the 8 heavens had ever mentioned it. In the 8 heavens, he had heard the most that there were no heaven-breaking experts in the human clan. There were even some rumors that said that there had never been a heaven-breaking expert in the human clan. Zhuowen knew that rumors were just rumors. He didn't know the truth. The sloppy man was right. If there had never been a heaven-breaking expert in the 8 heavens, why did each heavens contain a heaven-breaking origin? Moreover, there was a rumor that when the 8 heaven-breaking origins were gathered together, they could break through the void sky realm and advance to the heaven-breaking realm. These rumors weren't groundless. Moreover, if the human race had heaven-crushing cultivators, then where had these heaven-crushing cultivators gone? The void sky 9 ascensions was the comprehension of life and death. It was an existence that had transcended life and death. It was an existence that had the same lifespan as this galaxy and could live for an extremely long time. There was no need to talk about heaven-breaking experts. They were already invincible existences. What existence in this galaxy could kill a heaven-breaking expert? Logically speaking, heaven-crushing elites should still exist. However, why had all of them disappeared without a trace? Could it be that there was some secret in this galaxy? Zhuowen's brows furrowed. He hadn't been in the 8 heavens for long. Although he had come into contact with many experts, Zhuowen hadn't come into contact with a true expert. According to Zhuowen's speculation, perhaps the secrets of the 8 heavens were hidden in the hands of the rulers of the 8 heavens. Even the strongest of the 10 great sects of the Great Brahma domain, the Half-Moon Palace, probably didn't know the true secrets of the 8 heavens. The Great Brahma domain, the Great Pure One, and the others definitely know the true secrets. Zhuowen muttered inwardly. If he hadn't met the sloppy man, Zhuowen wouldn't have known that the devouring world still existed and that the 8 heavens weren't as simple as they seemed on the surface. Moreover, apart from Devour, Zhuowen had also heard of the Dragon Clan in the 8 heavens. It was said that the Dragon Clan was even rarer and more powerful than Devour. Only now did Zhuowen realize that he was like a frog at the bottom of a well. He really didn't know anything about the true history of the 8 heavens. However, Zhuowen knew that he couldn't be blamed. After all, he had cultivated for too short a time and advanced too quickly. Therefore, he didn't have the time to come into contact with the true history of the heavens. Chapter 2195, 9-cycle reincarnation array. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. The human clan's affairs have nothing to do with us. The sloppy man waved his hand and looked at Zhuowen with a smile. Junior, when we were in the skeleton world, I saw that you had a human doppelganger. Can you show me your human doppelganger? Zhuowen's heart tightened. However, under this man's gaze, he knew that he had to release his real body. Although he didn't think that this sloppy man would think that the human body was his real body, he was still worried. After all, This man was the previous Devour King. Perhaps he had some unimaginable means. Thinking of this, the black-clad Zhuowen waved his sleeve. A devouring vortex appeared, and his real body appeared in front of the sloppy man, his white robe fluttering in the wind. During the process of entering the corpse's heavenly road, Zhuowen didn't put his real body into the Tsanglan's secret realm. Instead, he put his real body into the two people's bodies. The sloppy man sized up Zhuowen's real body, clicking his tongue in amazement. Your real body's soul consciousness is really strong. It's definitely the strongest among all the human cultivators I've ever seen. How did you do it? Zhuowen took a deep breath and smiled. After I seized this human's body, I shared my God soul with the two bodies. I didn't control this human like a puppet. Senior, you know that I'm drifting outside, so I can't expose my identity. If I control this human like a puppet, I'll be exposed easily. After all, Devour is a precious species in the 8 heavens. Of course, the main God soul isn't Devour. After all, this human is just my clone. The sloppy man nodded. He looked at Zhuowen's real body again and smiled. You can keep it. Now, I'll help you take out the death chi on your right arm. Give me your right hand. Zhuowen retrieved his real body. His eyes flickered, but he still extended his shriveled right hand. The sloppy man grabbed Zhuowen's right hand, and his gaze turned serious. Then, Zhuowen saw a black halo appear in the sloppy man's palm. Zhuowen was familiar with the aura of this black halo. It was the devouring power, which was much more formidable than his Devour clone. No doubt, the scruffy-looking man was much more proficient in using the devouring power than Zhuowen's Devour clone. Immediately after, Zhuowen was surprised to find that the death aura in his right arm was continuously being absorbed by the black halo in the sloppy man's hand. When all the chi of death in his right arm had been absorbed, Zhuowen's right arm was no longer shriveled. Instead, it was full of vitality and recovered to its original state. The sloppy man's gaze became increasingly solemn. With a low roar, his right hand suddenly clenched, and the black halo was crushed by him. Immediately, a gray gas rushed out from the black halo, and like a fish, it continuously swam in the air. It's the death aura. It's very powerful. If you don't want it, I will destroy it. The sloppy man said indifferently. I want it. Zhuowen answered hastily. He had personally experienced the power of the death aura. Since the sloppy man had taken it out, how could he not want it? The sloppy man nodded and didn't say anything else. His right hand spun, and a black mist shot out from his palm, covering the gray death aura. Then, the black mist wiggled and condensed into a black cube. After that, he threw the black cube to Zhuowen. I have temporarily sealed the death aura for you. If you want to use it, you can refine it. However, the refining process will be painful and difficult, the sloppy man said indifferently. Zhuowen received the black cube, clasping his hands together to thank him. Junior, you know that I purposely let you in outside the space vault, the sloppy man said all of a sudden. Zhuowen kept the black cube. His eyes flickered, and he said in a deep voice, Senior, please tell me what you need. If I can do it, I will do my best to help you. The sloppy man nodded and said, I need you to help me get out of this skeleton world. I have been trapped here for too long. I need your help. Zhuowen didn't bat an eyelid and continued, Senior, please tell me. I will do my best to help. Zhuowen didn't make full promises. After all, the sloppy man was sealed by the new generation Devourer King. The Devourer King's strength was definitely terrifying. He was at least on the same level as Taiching and Sakyamuni. With Zhuowen's current strength, he didn't believe that he had the ability to help the sloppy man get out of this sealed place. Don't worry. If you help me get out of here, I will definitely not treat you unfairly. After all, you are a junior of my clan. The sloppy man took a deep look at Zhuowen and continued, First, what you need to do is very simple. Help me kill someone. Who is it? Zhuowen asked. The chief of the Bone Halberd tribe, Si Ling. This old fart was already a candle in the wind when he entered the skeleton world. He was already on the verge of death. However, this old fart was very lucky. He actually found this sealed place. Moreover, this old fart's array skills are also very high. He is at least an 8th level divine array master. He took advantage of the fact that this king was suppressed by the sealed place and couldn't get out. He secretly built the 9-cycle Samsara formation and built the Bone Halberd tribe around the 9-cycle Samsara formation. The 9-cycle Samsara formation was used by this old fart to absorb this king's vitality to prolong his life. I think you should have discovered it when you entered the Bone Halberd tribe. The 9-cycle Samsara formation is a peak 8th level formation. It has a very terrifying illusion technique. When the sloppy man said this, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Obviously, he was very unhappy with Si Ling's method of absorbing his vitality. Zhuowen was surprised. He didn't expect Si Ling to be so bold as to absorb the vitality of the king of the skeleton world. At the same time, he also remembered the illusion formation that he felt when he first entered the Bone Halberd tribe. Obviously, the illusion formation that he couldn't see through should be the 9-cycle Samsara formation that the sloppy man mentioned. Senior, since Si Ling's array skills are so high and he's so bold, his strength must be very terrifying, right? Zhuowen said in a deep voice. The sloppy man nodded and said helplessly, Yes, this old fart is very smart. He knew that he couldn't use divine power in the skeleton world, so he figured out the power of faith. My devouring power can only devour divine power, but it can't devour the power of faith. The power of faith? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Yes, the power of faith. Regarding the king of the skeleton world, there was no such thing. After that old fart came here, he used my name to spread the news. His purpose was to make the people of the skeleton world believe in this so-called king. Moreover, this old fart had arranged a statue to collect the power of faith in the Bone Halberd tribe. That statue wasn't my image, but the old fart's. So, the king that the people of the skeleton world talked about wasn't me, but that old fart. The power of faith is illusory. I can't absorb it at all. So, I can only watch this old fart become stronger slowly. The killing intent in the sloppy man's eyes became more and more vigorous as he gritted his teeth. Zhuowen lowered his head and pondered. Then he suddenly asked, Senior, if this Si Ling isn't weak, why didn't he come here to find you? The sloppy man sneered and said, In the skeleton world, I couldn't do anything to that Si Ling. But here, I can kill this old fart with a flip of my hand. Moreover, with that old fart's cautious character, he won't come here. He values his life more than anyone else. Chapter 2196. Phagocytosis. Zhuowen nodded. What the sloppy man said was reasonable, so he didn't have much doubt about it. Senior, since the undead spirit can use the power of faith, and he's a formation master, won't it be difficult for me to deal with him? Zhuowen asked. The sloppy man shook his head and said, Don't worry, I've already planned it out. That undead spirit mainly relies on the power of faith, and this old man has used the Bone Halberd tribe to strengthen the seal. If you don't destroy the Bone Halberd tribe's great formation, even if this king tells you how to break the formation, you won't be able to break it. Saying that, the sloppy man waved his sleeve and took out a pitch-black imperial jade seal, saying, This is the symbol of the devouring king's status, phagocytosis. With this phagocytosis, you can be considered the king of the devouring clan. At that time, The new devouring king wanted to snatch my phagocytosis. Unfortunately, I hid it well, so that guy could only let it go. He couldn't kill me, so he could only seal me here. Zhuowen took the pitch-black imperial jade seal from the sloppy man and squinted his eyes. This imperial jade seal wasn't simple. The moment his hands touched it, he could clearly feel a thick aura of vicissitudes flowing out, making Zhuowen shiver. There's a seal inside. Zhuowen couldn't help but ask in surprise after observing it for a while. The sloppy man nodded and said this phagocytosis was refined by the first devouring king. It has the mighty power of a heaven-breaking divine artifact. However, there are also 9,999 kinds of powerful seals inside. If you want to display the full power of the phagocytosis, you have to refine all 9,999 kinds of seals inside the phagocytosis. Zhuowen exclaimed in surprise. He stared at the phagocytosis in disbelief and asked, "Is this a heaven-crushing divine tool?" However, the sloppy man waved his hand and said, "Strictly speaking, it's not a true heaven-crushing god tool, but its might surpasses that of a true heaven-crushing god tool. It's said that only by unlocking all of the 9,999 restrictions within it can one unleash the might of the heaven-crushing god tool. This is only a rumor, and I don't know if it's true." Zhuowen calmed down, but his heart was still filled with shock. Up until now, the most powerful divine tools Zhuowen had seen were secondary heaven-crushing divine tools, such as Chun Changxing's 9-extinction divine rune sword and Fu Yu's spatial annihilation meteor. The inconspicuous black jade seal in front of him was actually a terrifying weapon that was even more powerful than a phagocytosis divine artifact. Although the sloppy man couldn't be sure whether the phagocytosis divine artifact was a phagocytosis divine artifact, he could tell just how terrifying the power of the phagocytosis divine artifact was. "May I know how many restrictions Senior has refined?" Zhuowen asked tentatively. 8,999 restrictions. There are still 1,000 restrictions left. With my power, I can't refine all of them. Even so, the power of the phagocytosis divine artifact isn't weaker than a normal secondary heaven-crushing divine artifact. Moreover, the phagocytosis divine artifact isn't like a secondary heaven-crushing divine artifact. In the bone world, a secondary heaven-crushing divine artifact is just a piece of scrap iron. Without God power, it can't be used. But the phagocytosis divine artifact is different. Take the phagocytosis divine artifact, and with Devour's power, the dead soul of the Bone Halberd tribe won't be your opponent. As long as you can kill that dead soul and destroy the 9-cycle reincarnation formation, you'll have done me a great favor. The sloppy man said indifferently. Zhuowen held the phagocytosis divine artifact. He couldn't calm down for a long time. Then he turned to the sloppy man and asked in a low voice, "Precursor, I've helped you a lot. How will you repay me?" The sloppy man pondered for a while and then smiled. "I'll help you awaken the royal bloodline." Royal bloodline? Zhuowen was surprised. The royal bloodline is King Devour's bloodline. Perhaps you don't know your situation, but I know it clearly. You have the royal bloodline. When you appeared in the space vault, I sensed it, said the sloppy man. Zhuowen was astounded. He mumbled to himself, "Precursor, you mean I'm King Devour too?" "In a sense, you're King Devour. That's why you're much stronger than Devour. Since you've always been away from your tribe, you don't have anyone to compare with. That's why you don't know how strong you are." The sloppy man smiled and continued, "Moreover, once you awaken the royal bloodline, your body's tenacity and innate supernatural powers will be strengthened. What do you think of this benefit?" Zhuowen pondered for a while. He remembered that when he crossed the fire, he had triggered a wisp of the Great Path's backlash. At that time, Old Ruthless had questioned his identity as a clone. No matter how strong Devour was, he couldn't trigger the Great Path's backlash. He would just be repelled by the Starry Sky's rules. However, Zhuowen's clone wasn't just repelled by the Starry Sky. Even the Great Path had punished him. It was obvious that his clone wasn't an ordinary Devour. It could be the Devour with the royal bloodline that the sloppy man had mentioned. "Have you thought it through?" asked the sloppy man indifferently. "Yes, I'll help you this time," said Zhuowen in a low voice. The sloppy man laughed and said, "Good. You take the phagocytosis. I've refined 8,999 restrictions of this phagocytosis. You just need to use the devouring power to activate it. Then it will be powerful." As he spoke, the sloppy man waved his sleeve. Immediately, Zhuowen felt as if the sky and earth were spinning around the bone hall, and waves of ripples appeared. When Zhuowen pulled himself together, he found that he was standing on the bone ladder of the corpse heavenly road. He lifted his head instinctively and found that the end of the corpse heavenly road was blurred. He couldn't see the end of the road. He knew that the sloppy man had teleported him out of the bone palace. "Junior, follow the corpse heavenly road. You can leave this place and reach the outskirts of the Bone Halberd tribe. After you finish your task, the phagocytosis will guide you to my place." The sloppy man's voice slowly rang out in Zhuowen's mind. It shook Zhuowen's eardrums to the point that it was deafening. Zhuowen turned around and left in an extremely straightforward manner. After walking for about 4 hours, Zhuowen walked down the corpse heavenly road. Immediately, he found that what appeared in front of him was no longer the corpse heavenly road. Instead, it was a mountain in the outskirts of the Bone Halberd tribe. This was the only place that wasn't shrouded by the blood mist. Obviously, the dead souls didn't know that he had landed here. Zhuowen's facial expression began to wriggle, and he turned into a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion. "I have less than 300 animal bones. It's not enough to sneak into the Bone Halberd tribe. I'll go around and collect 300 animal bones first." Zhuowen murmured. He didn't disturb the Bone Halberd tribe. Instead, he rushed to another mountain in the Bone Halberd tribe. He had a map of the Bone Halberd tribe. He had bought it when he entered the Bone Halberd tribe. Now, it came in handy. About 4 hours later, Zhuowen returned to the entrance of the mountain again. He placed a piece of animal bone in the middle of the stone tablet at the entrance. After a while, a graceful figure slowly walked out of the blood mist. Chapter 2197. I offer my blood as a sacrifice, Yu Xiaohui, dressed in a blood-red dress, sized up Zhuowen and said indifferently, "You joined the Bone Halberd tribe." Zhuowen nodded, and then he tossed a leather bag to Yu Xiaohui. The latter opened the leather bag and took a look. Soon after, she smiled charmingly and said, "All right, then come with me now." The following steps were similar to when he and Lin Shiping came in. However, when Yu Xiaohui brought him into the valley, Yu Xiaohui suddenly grabbed Zhuowen's right arm and threw Zhuowen to the ground. The 2 guards at the door quickly took out ropes and tied Zhuowen up. Zhuowen's eyes were calm, and he did not resist. Instead, he looked at Yu Xiaohui and asked, "Why?" "You'll know in a moment." Yu Xiaohui smiled mysteriously and said to the 2 guards, "Take this person away." Zhuowen did not struggle. Although with his current strength, it would be easy for him to break free from the ropes, he did not do so. He thought of the situation when he and Lin Shiping came in. Comparing it to now, he felt that the treatment he and Lin Shiping received was definitely intentional. But why did the Bone Halberd tribe do that? Did they know that he, Zhuowen, was not simple? Or did they have other motives? The 2 guards quickly came to the dilapidated hut. However, there was another world inside the hut. In the middle of the hut, there was a secret passage. The two guards opened the secret passage and casually threw Zhuowen down. Then, they closed the entrance of the secret passage. The secret passage was slanted downwards. There were metal cylinders around it. Zhuowen fell rapidly. Zhuowen fell for a full hour. It was obvious how deep the secret passage was. When Zhuowen reached the bottom, he kicked off with his right foot and jumped up. He stood steadily on the ground. At the same time, the rope that bound his hands also broke into pieces. Patting the dust off his body, Zhuowen's gaze landed on the ground where he had landed. His expression quickly turned gloomy and murderous. The piles of corpses in front of Zhuowen were almost piled up into many small hills. There was a huge karst cave inside, which was much larger than the Bonehalber tribe. Moreover, Zhuowen could tell at a glance that these skeletons were not the skeletons that could be found everywhere in the skeleton world, but the corpses of dead humans. Inside this karst cave, there were tens of thousands of corpses piled up like mountains. It was Zhuowen's first time seeing so many corpses. It was not an exaggeration to call it a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Suddenly, Zhuowen's ears twitched. He could vaguely hear a soft sound right in front of the cave. Zhuowen took a step forward and rushed forward. Soon, he arrived at the end of the cave. At the end of the cave, there was a bright bonfire. In front of the bonfire, more than 10 withered figures were prostrating on the ground, constantly kowtowing to the cave. I offer my blood as a sacrifice, eternal youth. I offer my blood as a sacrifice, the supreme path. I offer my blood as a sacrifice, the supreme ruler. Voices that sounded like they were talking in their sleep kept coming out of the mouths of these figures. Moreover, Zhuowen noticed that bloody wounds appeared on the bodies of these figures. Blood flowed out of the wounds and flowed towards a white statue at the end of the cave. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the white statue. He realized that the white statue was the image of the Bonehalber tribe's chief, Si Ling. The blood all gathered on the white statue, causing the surface of the white statue to reveal a blood-red color. As the blood continued to gather, the blood-red color of the white statue became more and more intense. Moreover, Zhuowen didn't know if it was an illusion, but he noticed that as the white statue absorbed the blood of these figures, a strange and unfathomable energy flowed out of the white statue. Zhuowen could feel this energy very clearly. This energy was different from divine power, but it was extremely powerful. Zhuowen's eyes slowly narrowed. This energy was actually not unfamiliar to Zhuowen. Back on the heavenly armor planet, he had come into contact with it. It was the power of faith. However, the power of faith emitted by the statue in front of him was just too powerful. The moment Zhuowen looked at the statue, he actually had the urge to worship it. It was as if as long as he worshipped this statue, he would be able to obtain all the power he wanted. He would be able to become the supreme ruler and look down on all living beings. Rumble. Suddenly, Zhuowen's mind exploded. Immediately after, a large golden hand blasted open Zhuowen's spiritual space and directly grabbed at the soul in the depths of the spiritual space. The speed of the golden hand was too fast. It actually blasted the divine soul star systems in the divine soul space into smithereens like a hot knife through butter. The intense pain caused Zhuowen to involuntarily cry out. He knelt on the ground and broke out in a cold sweat. Soul kill. Fortunately, the moment Zhuowen's spiritual space was blasted open by the large golden hand, he discovered that his consciousness could be used. He immediately used the soul kill skill. The terrifying spiritual space condensed into a murderous attack and fiercely blasted towards the large golden hand. The large golden hand, which was originally unstoppable, immediately came to a halt when the soul kill attack arrived. But soon, the large golden hand erupted with an even more powerful aura. It completely annihilated the soul kill and continued to grab at the depths of Zhuowen's spiritual space. Zhuowen's whole body broke out in cold sweat. He knew very well that as long as the large golden hand really grabbed his soul, he would probably be like the more than a dozen people kneeling on the ground. He would completely lose his consciousness and would only kneel devoutly, offering his faith and blood. Thinking of this, Zhuowen did not hesitate to take out the heavenly domain's starry sky essence from the spirit ring and immediately took a drop. Fortunately, his consciousness could be used again because of the large golden hand, so he immediately took out a whole bottle of heavenly domain starry sky essence from the spirit ring. The moment he took the heavenly domain starry sky essence, Zhuowen's spiritual space was immediately restored to its peak. Zhuowen once again launched the soul kill. This time, the soul kill created by the peak of his spiritual space was many times more powerful than the soul kill he used in a hurry just now. Countless cracks immediately appeared on the surface of the large golden hand under the soul kill, and it was forced to retreat. However, as time passed, Zhuowen found that the power of the large golden hand was constantly increasing. It's all because of these dozen people. Zhuowen suddenly summoned Zhuowen's main body. The white-robed Zhuowen's main body took a step forward and knocked out the more than a dozen figures kneeling on the ground. Chapter 2198. Faith. After knocking those people out, Zhuowen could feel that the power of the golden hand was weakening. Soul kill. Zhuowen growled, and once again used the soul slain method. More than 3,000 divine soul galaxies in his soul space began to churn and combine, finally condensing into a gigantic beast. The giant beast formed from the divine soul slammed into the giant golden hand. Rumble! A continuous series of explosions suddenly sounded. Soon after, the large golden hand collapsed with a loud bang. Puff! Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood and suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the white statue embedded in the wall of the cave in shock. Just as Zhuowen broke through the golden hand in the most magnificent skull cave in the center of the Bone Halberd tribe, the face of the undead sitting on the throne changed, and he involuntarily stood up. Master, what happened? Chun Chong Sheng, who was standing not far away, noticed the undead's strange behavior and asked in surprise. The undead's expression was ugly. His eyes flashed, and he said, "The statue on the third altar is strange. I lost contact with it." Chun Chong Sheng was shocked. He knew a lot about the undead during this time. The Bone Halberd tribe was not used by the undead to accept people from other tribes in the bone world. It was used by the undead to increase his own strength. Below the Bone Halberd tribe, there were 9 caves. Each cave was extremely large, and there were white statues of the undead placed inside. Any outsider who joined the Bone Halberd tribe would be thrown into one of the 9 caves. Then, they would be forced to worship the statue to obtain a strong power of faith. Previously, Chun Chong Sheng had followed the undead into the 9 caves. The scene inside could be said to be incomparably miserable, with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Even if Chun Chong Sheng was experienced and knowledgeable, he was still shocked by the scene in the 9 caves. Chun Chong Sheng had seen the white statue at the end of the cave before. He knew how terrifying it was. When he was brought into the cave by the undead, he saw with his own eyes that a woman went crazy when she was 10 meters away from the cave. She knelt on the ground as if she was in a dream and kept kowtowing to the statue. In the end, she could not escape the fate of becoming a corpse. Later, he heard from the dead spirit that the white statue had the powerful power to break through the divine soul and grab the soul inside the divine soul. Anyone who had their soul taken away would basically worship the white statue crazily and be willing to contribute everything they had. If it were the outside world, it would not be difficult for him to capture the soul like this. But in the bone world, to be able to use this method was indeed shocking. This was why Chen Changsheng was afraid of the 9 caves below the Bone Halberd tribe. He knew that if he fell into any of the 9 caves, he would not be any better than the others. What should we do now? Chen Changsheng said, let's go to the 3rd cave. As the undead spoke, he walked down from the throne and took Chen Changsheng, Yu Xiaohui, and the others who were close to him to the 3rd cave. At this moment, Zhuowen was standing in front of the white statue. Since he destroyed the golden hand, he found that the golden hand did not appear again. The aura of the white statue also became weaker and weaker. In the end, it became an ordinary statue. Zhuowen touched the statue with his hand. He did not find any trace of the power of faith on the surface of the statue. It seemed that after he destroyed the golden hand, the power of faith in the white statue completely disappeared. It's useless. This is only one of the statues of faith in the undead's 9 caves. The power of faith absorbed by this statue is not stored in the other 9 statues. It is stored in the main statue. The main statue is hidden in a very secret place by the undead. A weak voice came from behind Zhuowen. Zhuowen turned around and found a middle-aged man among the more than 10 people who were knocked out by him. He was holding his head and struggling to get up. Noticing Zhuowen's gaze, the middle-aged man smiled and clasped his fist at Zhuowen. Thank you for saving my life, benefactor. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would have died in this cave. Zhuowen nodded and said in a low voice, how do you know this? Although the middle-aged man in front of him looked disheveled, Zhuowen could tell from his temperament that this man was not ordinary. He should be a powerful expert in the outside world. However, after entering the bone world, one would lose their divine power. No matter how powerful one was in the outside world, once one entered the bone world, one would have to start from scratch. Everyone's starting point was the same. In the bone world, too many void sky experts were killed by true gods and heavenly gods. The middle-aged man smiled bitterly and said, it's because the dozen of us here are the elders who participated in the construction of the 9 caves. Originally, we had an agreement with the undead. After we successfully obtained the power of faith, we would share it equally. However, he took it all for himself. Now, he's even making a move on us, old fellows. Zhuowen waved his hand. He was not interested in the relationship between the middle-aged man and the undead. He said indifferently, there are 9 caves. If I destroy all the white statues in the 9 caves, will I be able to destroy the undead? The middle-aged man shook his head and said, not yet. However, it can weaken the undead's power, because the 9 caves are constantly absorbing the power of faith in their own caves. Don't be fooled by the fact that the caves are full of corpses. There are only a few living people. The white statues capture the souls of these corpses when they were alive. These corpses contributed the power of faith to the undead when they were alive. After death, their souls can't be reincarnated. They stay in the statues and continue to contribute their faith. However, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. This dead spirit was really ruthless. These corpses had sacrificed their lives when they were alive, and their souls could not be reincarnated after death. They had contributed their faith to the dead spirit generation after generation. This was really too sinister. Zhuowen finally understood the middle-aged man's feelings. Death was not terrible. What was terrible was that they couldn't even be reincarnated after death. This was the real horror. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and summoned the devouring vortex. He took the unconscious people into his inner world. Then he looked at the middle-aged man and said, take me to the other caves. Be quick. The middle-aged man nodded quickly. However, his body was too weak. He almost fell to the ground as soon as he stood up. Fortunately, Zhuowen supported him and fed him a pill. Ever since when spiritual space had been destroyed by the golden hand, The force that had imprisoned his spiritual sense had disappeared without a trace. Therefore, Zhuo could now use his spiritual sense to take out the things in the spiritual ring. Thank you, Senior. After the middle-aged man swallowed the pill, his body was in a much better state. He quickly cupped his fists. No need to talk nonsense. Let's go. Zhuo said indifferently. The middle-aged man hurriedly nodded. Then, the two of them quickly left the cave. Chapter 2199. 9 Caves According to the Middle-Aged Man. This hidden passage was secretly left behind when they were building it. Now, it was finally put to use. Not long after Zhuo and the middle-aged man left the cave, the undead led a group of people and rushed in excitedly. When the undead saw that the white statue at the end of the cave was dim, his face immediately became gloomy with his eyes. How could he not see that the white statue had been completely destroyed? That golden hand was actually the condensation of the tens of thousands of souls stored inside the white statue. Zhuo used Soul Kill to destroy the golden hand, but in reality, he had destroyed all the tens of thousands of souls in the white statue. Where are Han Yan and the others? Why are they all gone? Could it be that Han Yan and the others destroyed the white statue? Yu Xiaohui came not far from the statue and saw the pool of blood on the ground. She could not help but ask in surprise. The undead's eyes were gloomy, and he shook his head. Absolutely impossible. With the strength of Han Yan and the others, they could not resist the power of the white statue. I'm afraid it's someone else. Just as the undead finished speaking, his expression changed greatly, and he said, Not good. The statue in the first cave has also lost contact with me. What? Just who did it? How could they have the ability to destroy the statue? Yu Xiaohui was also somewhat surprised. Xiaohui, go to the tribe and send 8 teams to the other 8 caves to wait for rabbits. Changsheng, follow me to the first cave. The undead ordered, then hurriedly left the cave with Qin Changsheng. Yu Xiaohui naturally did not dare to disobey the undead's orders. She cupped her hands and left the cave, heading to the tribe to organize the teams. In the first cave, the statue in front of Zhuo was completely shattered. Immediately after, a golden light swept out from the statue, pouring into the palm-sized temple that Zhuo had made in advance. This small temple was made of polished jade and was specially used to store souls. Zhuo heard about this statue from the middle-aged man, and also knew that it stored the souls of all those innocent lives. The small temple represented peace, and these souls who were unable to reincarnate would eventually receive good karma after entering it. Furthermore, Zhuo also discovered that as his soul entered the small temple, he discovered a strange power gradually surging into his body. That's the power of faith. You saved them, so these souls naturally showed gratitude and respect to you. This is also a kind of faith. It's much stronger than the faith of the undead who sacrifice themselves for you. True faith is actually sincere and not forced. The middle-aged man sighed softly. Han Yan, take me to the next cave. Although I'm not a saint, since I know that these souls are innocent, I have no reason to ignore them, Zhuo said to the middle-aged man. Along the way, Zhuo also learned that this middle-aged man's name was Han Yan. He was the Grand Elder of the Half-Moon Hall in the outside world. His position was second only to the ancestor of the Half-Moon Hall. He was a late-stage Void Sky 8th step expert. The Void Sky 8th step could be subdivided into 4 small realms: early stage, middle stage, late stage, and peak stage. Old man Wu Qing was at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step, and Chen Changsheng, who chased after Zhuo, was at the late stage of the Void Sky 8th step. Fu Yuz and Yang Zhonghui were at the middle stage of the Void Sky 8th step. It was said that the ancestor of the Half-Moon Hall, Yuezu, was at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step, and was a peerless expert with half a foot in the void sky ninth step. It was precisely because of the existence of Uezu that the half-moon hall became the leader of the 10 great sects, and was ranked first among the 10 great sects. Their comprehensive strength and prestige were unparalleled. Zhuowen estimated his current strength, and estimated that he was at the early stage of the void sky 8th step. If Devour revealed his true body, he should be able to reach the middle stage of the void sky 8th step. Of course, Zhuowen collected these souls this time purely out of compassion. In any case, he planned to destroy the statues in the 9 caves, so he could easily rescue these souls. As for the power of faith, it was a pleasant surprise. Zhuowen and Han Yen moved quickly, and before Dead Spirit and the others, they had destroyed the statues in the 4 caves. When they arrived at the 5th cave, they immediately realized that something was wrong. The 5th cave was filled with shadows, and a group of guards was guarding it. Fortunately, Zhuowen could use his soul consciousness, so he had sensed something wrong. Thus, he and Han Yen had hidden. "Brother Zhuo, what should we do now? There's a group of guards in the 5th cave. Should we force our way in?" Han Yen asked Zhuowen in a low voice. Zhuowen nodded. "There's no other way except to force our way in." Then Zhuowen clenched his right hand, and instantly more than 10 black thunderbolts shot out. These black thunderbolts were silent and fast. In just a blink of an eye, they had sunk into the back of the head of the guard in the 5th cave, killing him instantly. The black thunderbolts were the extreme lightning energy, and their power was terrifying. Moreover, these guards couldn't use their god power, so they were only a little stronger than ordinary people. Encountering these black thunderbolts, they would die without a doubt. After quietly killing this group of people, Zhuowen swiftly arrived in front of the statue. In front of the statue, there was a thin and withered figure kneeling. From this figure, Zhuowen knew that it was a woman, and this figure gave him a very familiar feeling. This woman was lying on the ground motionlessly, and the aura on her body was very weak. Zhuowen's soul consciousness swept out, and his face changed drastically. He quickly walked forward and pulled the woman back. "Miss Lin." Zhuowen helped the woman up, and his face was slightly ugly. This woman was none other than Lin Shiping, who had joined the Bone Halberd tribe with Zhuowen. Originally, Zhuowen had set up a defensive array, a trap array, and a concealment array outside the cave. In his opinion, as long as Lin Shiping didn't go out, the people of the Bone Halberd tribe would have a hard time breaking in. But now, it seemed that he was wrong. Ever since he learned from the Devourer King that Si Ling was a powerful god array master, Zhuowen knew that the array he set up outside the cave was useless. It was just that he had always thought that Si Ling was the chief of the Bone Halberd tribe. So how could he shamelessly destroy other people's array? Now, he knew that Si Ling was truly shameless. Zhuowen took Lin Shiping's pulse, and found that the latter's life force was not completely cut off. He let out a sigh of relief, then took out a drop of Heavenly Domain Star Essence and fed it to Lin Shiping. Heavenly Domain Star Essence. Han Yen looked at the white liquid that Zhuowen fed to Lin Shiping and immediately recognized that it was the Heavenly Domain Star Essence, and his heart was filled with shock. The Heavenly Domain Star Essence was extremely precious. Although the Half-Moon Palace had such a treasure, it was limited, and they would never use it carelessly. But this, Zhuowen in front of him directly took out a drop and fed it to an unfamiliar woman. In his eyes, this was an extremely wasteful act. Of course, the Heavenly Domain Star Essence was not his, so he couldn't say anything. He just felt pain in his heart. After taking the Heavenly Domain Star Essence, Lin Shiping slowly woke up and saw Zhuowen in front of her. Senior Zhuo? I'm not dreaming, am I? Why are you here?" Chapter 2200. Facing the Dead Spirit. "Miss Lin, this is not a good place to stay. You should go in first. Seeing that Lin Shiping was still in a daze, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and summoned the devouring vortex. He did not explain further. Lin Shiping nodded and entered the devouring vortex without hesitation. In Lin Shiping's opinion, a powerful being like Zhuowen would not harm her. After all, he could kill her as easily as squashing an ant. After putting away Lin Shiping, Zhuowen broke the white statue and collected the soul inside. The next few caves were all heavily guarded, but to Zhuowen, these guards were insignificant. After Zhuowen collected the souls in the 8th karst cave, he stepped into the 9th karst cave. Just as he stepped into the 9th karst cave, a scorching hot aura gushed out from within. Zhuowen reacted quickly and lifted Han Yen up by his collar. Then, with a stomp of his right foot, he left the place in an instant. The moment Zhuowen left, a huge fireball hit the place where Zhuowen was standing. The solid rock wall was burned into a huge pit by the scorching heat. Everything in the bone world was abnormally strong. When Zhuowen first entered the canyon at the entrance of the bone world, he used the 9 extinction sword to hack at the ground. He found that it was very difficult to leave a mark. The walls of this cave were extremely hard. Even a secondary heaven-breaking divine weapon would need to hack a few times to leave a mark. However, from this fireball, one could see how terrifyingly hot it was. If Zhuowen were to be hit by this fireball, he would definitely be severely injured, even if he wouldn't die immediately. After Zhuowen let go of Han Yen, he looked at the group of people not far away with a gloomy expression. Dead Spirit was holding a bone staff and looking at Zhuowen with fire in his eyes. Behind the Dead Spirit, Yu Xiaohui and the others, as well as the subordinates in bone clothes, followed. Among them, Zhuowen even saw a familiar face. Chen Changsheng, who was standing behind Undead, noticed Zhuowen's gaze, and his expression immediately became uncomfortable. If he hadn't lost his divine power, he would have been able to easily dodge it. However, in his current state, facing that fireball, he would undoubtedly die. However, Zhuowen was able to dodge it easily, especially with the speed of his movement technique. It was definitely not something a cultivator who had lost his divine power could achieve. There's no trace of divine power flowing on this boy's body, but there's another kind of power. Is this the power of extreme Tao? Undead was a wily old fox. He could see the extreme Tao aura on Zhuowen's body at a glance. On the other hand, Yu Xiaohui looked at Zhuowen in surprise. At this moment, Zhuowen had already recovered his original appearance, so she naturally recognized Zhuowen. It was just that Yu Xiaohui did not expect this Zhuowen to be so powerful to be able to dodge Lord Undead's attack. Zhuo Xiaoyu, congratulations. You actually came out of the corpse Heavenly Road so quickly. The Undead's eyes flickered, but he suddenly laughed out loud, as if he didn't know anything about the fireball sneak attacking Zhuowen just now. Zhuowen sneered in his heart and said indifferently, "Chief is too kind." He. Looking at Zhuo Xiaoyu, you should have gained quite a bit from the corpse Heavenly Road, but little friend, you are not honest. We clearly had an agreement before. I will open the corpse Heavenly Road and let you in, and you need to help me get back the 7-headed bone flower. The Undead suddenly said. However, Zhuowen said indifferently, Chief must be joking. The corpse Heavenly Road is too dangerous. I did enter the Myriad Head Cave according to the agreement, but the 7-headed bone flower is too dangerous. I know that I can't take it down, so I gave up. So that's how it is. The Undead nodded, as if he did not blame Zhuowen, but very quickly his eyes narrowed, and a wave of killing intent surged out like a tide. I don't blame you for the matter of the corpse Heavenly Road. After all, life is more important than anything else. But why did you break into my cave and destroy my statue? Are you trying to cause trouble? The killing intent in the undead's eyes grew stronger and stronger, as if he couldn't wait to kill Zhuowen right now. Zhuowen slapped his forehead, as if blaming himself, and said, "Chief, these caves are yours. I really didn't know. You should have told me earlier. If I had known that this cave was yours, even if you gave me 100 guts, I wouldn't have touched it." The undead trembled in anger. He knew that Zhuowen was deliberately angering him. The statues in the 9 caves were all in his image. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that these things belonged to him the moment they saw the statues. However, Zhuowen pretended to be angry, and the undead's killing intent became even stronger. "Zhuowen, you are too bold. How dare you offend my master? In this corpse world, he is the king. You are courting death by provoking him." Qin Changshen had already calmed down. He thought of the undead's various methods and knew that no matter how strong Zhuowen was, he couldn't be the undead's opponent. Therefore, he became fearless. "Shut up. I am talking to your master. What right does a dog slave like you have to interrupt?" Zhuowen said without any trace of politeness. "You—" Qin Chang was so angry that he was trembling as he glared at Zhuowen. After all, he was an old ancestor of Qianquan's sect. Now that Zhuowen had called him a dog slave, he felt extremely sullen in his heart. However, he did not dare to rush forward. In this place, Zhuowen's extreme power was not suppressed, and his strength was not suppressed by much. In this place, only the undead could firmly suppress Zhuowen. "What about me? If you have the guts, then come out and fight me one-on-one. All you know is to bark like a dog. Don't you feel ashamed?" Zhuowen said without any trace of politeness. Qin Changshen had already turned hostile with him. Not to mention that Qin Changshen's strength was suppressed in this corpse world. Even if Qin Changshen's strength wasn't suppressed in the outside world, Zhuowen still didn't fear him. "If it wasn't for the fact that my strength was suppressed, I would have killed you 1,000 times already," Qin Changshen said unwillingly. "At the end of the day, you don't dare to fight me one-on-one. Since that's the case, then don't embarrass yourself. Get lost." Zhuowen sneered. Qin Changshen was really angry, but he didn't lose his mind. He calmed down and looked at Zhuowen with a gloomy gaze. The undead walked forward and looked at Zhuowen indifferently, as if he was looking at a dead man. "Zhuowen, it seems like you are very confident. Do you think that just because you have extreme strength, I am no match for you?" The undead said calmly. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and recalled Han Yen. He looked at the undead and said, "Yes, and today I am here to kill you." The undead laughed, and his killing intent grew stronger. He hammered the bone staff on the ground, and instantly the countless corpses in the cave exploded into bone fragments, forming a whirlwind behind the undead. Chapter 2201, Phagocytosis versus Death Spirit. "All of you, step back. We'll talk after I kill this kid," Death Spirit said, and leaped onto the bone python's head. Qin Changshen, Yu Xiaohui, and the others retreated with reverence in their eyes. They didn't dare to underestimate this bone python. This bone python was condensed from the power of faith. Its destructive power was extremely terrifying. Even in the outside world, it was comparable to a cultivator of the void, Sky 8 Step. Of course, the material in the bone world was much tougher than the outside world. A battle between Void Sky 8 Step cultivators would definitely be earth-shattering in the outside world, but in the bone world, which was as tough as a prison, it was impossible to have the same power as the outside world. Roar! The bone python roared and swung its huge tail. It shot towards Zhuowen like an arrow leaving the bow. Its speed was so fast that Qin Changshen and the others could only see a white shadow. Zhuowen coldly snorted and grabbed with both hands. Immediately, 2 divine swords made of lightning and fire energy condensed. Zhuowen stomped his right foot and met the attack fearlessly. His two swords danced, emitting a blazing light. Bang, bang, bang. In just an instant, Zhuowen and the bone python collided. Zhuowen's two swords danced at an extremely fast speed, slashing out again and again. However, what shocked Zhuowen was that the bone python's head was extremely hard. The extreme Tao divine sword in his hand could only leave a slight mark on it. Whoosh! The instant Zhuowen chopped down on the bone python's head, the bone python's huge tail was like a whip as it fiercely lashed out, creating a whistling sound in the air. Zhuowen threw out the extreme Tao divine sword with his right hand, causing the trajectory of the bone python's tail to deviate by quite a bit. It brushed past Zhuowen's body. Death Spirit, who was standing on the bone python's head, growled. He pointed the bone staff in his hand, and a green fireball shot towards Chen Chongsheng at an extremely fast speed. Zhuowen, however, did not panic. He immediately summoned the phagocytosis that Devourer King had given him. The black imperial jade seal flew out of Zhuowen's hand. And when the terrifying green fireball hit the imperial jade seal, the fireball was immediately absorbed by the imperial jade seal. What is this? The undead stared at the phagocytosis summoned by Zhuowen in horror. He could sense a familiar and terrifying aura from the phagocytosis. Don't you recognize me? For so many years, you've used the sealed land to obtain many benefits from this king. Today, this king will calculate everything with you. King Shi's cold voice came from the phagocytosis. Then, the black phagocytosis grew bigger and bigger. In just a blink of an eye, it grew from the size of a palm to dozens of feet tall, occupying 2/3 of the cave. Chen Chongsheng and the others were dumbfounded. They had no choice but to withdraw from the cave. They could sense the terrifying aura from the imperial jade seal. Death Spirit's eyes were gloomy. He turned to Zhuowen and said coldly, "You met that person on the path of corpses?" Zhuowen did not answer. Instead, it was King Shi inside the phagocytosis who laughed and said, "That's right. I led him here. You coward. Other than using the seal to absorb my vitality, what else can you do?" Rumble. The black phagocytosis smashed down without any warning. It was like a small hill in front of Death Spirit. Death Spirit stomped his right foot and jumped down from the bone python's head. The bone python flew out, intending to block the phagocytosis. Unfortunately, the moment the bone python touched the phagocytosis, it let out a miserable cry. Its huge body collapsed inch by inch, turning into countless bone fragments. Fire Shield. Undead suddenly raised his bone staff, and streams of faith power were transmitted into the bone staff. Soon after, the eyes of the skull at the top of the bone staff became glossy green, and it became extremely strange. Then, green flames gushed out from the eyes of the skull at the top of the bone staff. It was like a sea of fire sweeping in front of Death Spirit and forming a solid wall of fire. "You'd better not force me. You can restrict divine power here, but you can't restrict the power of faith. I know you're afraid of this power. If you retreat now, we won't interfere in each other's business," Death Spirit said, his forehead covered in cold sweat. "Just with trash like you?" King Shi's disdainful laughter came from the phagocytosis. The phagocytosis's power increased by a lot. Kacha! As the phagocytosis's power increased, the fire shield in front of Death Spirit was unable to withstand it. Countless cracks appeared on its surface, as if it would shatter at any moment. After 5 breaths, the fire shield was broken. Zhuowen, who had retreated from the battle, heard Death Spirit's ferocious scream. "You force me. Do you think I don't have a backup plan? Today, I'll show you my backup plan." Boom. As soon as Death Spirit finished talking, the entire karst cave shook hard. Countless rocks fell from the ceiling, hitting the ground like raindrops. When the dust settled, Zhuowen found that there was a big hole above the karst cave. Death spirit and phagocytosis weren't in the cave. Apparently, they had left through that big hole. Zhuowen immediately dashed to the end of the karst cave where the statues were. His eyes sparkled as he destroyed the last statue. He took out the small temple and collected all the souls inside. After that, Zhuowen returned to the center of the karst cave. He jumped up and jumped out of the hole in the sky. At this moment, the entire Bone Halberd tribe was in chaos. The battle between death spirit and phagocytosis was getting more and more terrifying. The entire Bone Halberd tribe was filled with energy fluctuations. Most of the caves were destroyed, and the people inside were dead or injured. Zhuowen dashed out of the karst cave. He immediately stopped and stared at the sky. He saw that in the sky above the Bone Halberd tribe, a huge formation had appeared out of nowhere. Countless ripples appeared on the surface of the formation, which looked ferocious and terrifying. At the same time, terrifying attacks were launched from every corner of the formation. The target was the phagocytosis, who was fighting with death spirit. Originally, phagocytosis's power was enough to suppress death spirit. However, at this moment, death spirit was using the formation of the Bone Halberd tribe to fight against phagocytosis. Phagocytosis didn't have much of an advantage. Zhuowen also noticed that phagocytosis seemed to be afraid of death spirit's faith power. Although it seemed to be fighting with death spirit fiercely, Zhuowen could see that phagocytosis seemed to be avoiding death spirit on purpose. "Junior, lend me a hand." Suddenly, Devourer King's voice echoed in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen's eyes flickered, but he didn't rush forward immediately. Instead, he transmitted his voice. "Senior, wait a moment. I need to refine the death energy you gave me. Otherwise, I can't take down death spirit." After that, Zhuowen randomly chose a cave. At the same time, he took out 9 beast bone array discs and set up a level 7 defensive formation. With the power of the level 7 defensive formation, it was enough to resist the shockwaves from the battle between phagocytosis and death spirit. Zhuowen found an excuse because he really wasn't death spirit's opponent. After all, if death spirit didn't use the 9-cycle samsara formation, Zhuowen could only fight with him. Now that he had the 9-cycle samsara formation, Zhuowen definitely wasn't his opponent. Chapter 2202. Refining the Death Aura. That little bastard. The Devourer King's exasperated voice came from the phagocytosis. He knew that Zhuowen didn't trust him at all. Si Ling sighed in his heart. It was already difficult for him to deal with the phagocytosis. If Zhuowen joined the battle, he might really be defeated. However, Si Ling was still on guard. He was afraid that Zhuowen and the Devourer King were just acting to confuse him. If Zhuowen suddenly attacked, it would be too late for him to cry. Inside the cave, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He summoned the Thunderfire sword and ordered Xiao He, pay attention to the battle outside. If there's any movement, tell me immediately. Xiao He sat on the sword's hilt. She knew the importance of the situation. She nodded and flew to the entrance of the cave, silently watching the battle outside. Zhuowen took out a black cube. He opened his mouth and spat out the extreme fire, which wrapped around the black cube. He was ready to refine the death aura inside the black cube. With Zhuowen's experience, he could see that the death aura and the phagocytosis weren't that different in strength. It would be difficult to determine the winner in a short time. Thus, he still had a lot of time to refine the death aura. Time passed slowly. The battle in the Bone Halberd tribe was getting fiercer and fiercer. The commotion was getting bigger and bigger. The entire bone world was affected. Many creatures in the bone world were alarmed by the terrifying commotion. Most of the cultivators squatted in the tribe, trembling and praying. There were also some brave ones who followed the commotion to the Bone Halberd tribe. However, no one dared to approach the tribe. 3 days later, the Bone Halberd tribe was completely in ruins. More than 80% of the tribesmen were killed. The rest of the tribesmen escaped quickly and avoided the disaster. Of course, in the Bone Halberd tribe, the only place that wasn't in ruins was Zhuowen's cave. Zhuowen had set up a level 7 defensive array outside the cave, and the location was at the edge of the Bone Halberd tribe. Therefore, although the battle between the undead and the phagocytosis was terrifying, it wasn't to the extent that it would affect Zhuowen. Mother Asterisker, there's actually such a terrifying guy in the bone world. I'm afraid that Wu Ling's strength is about the same as Wu Qing's, or maybe even stronger. Outside the cave, Xiao He gazed numbly at the ripples that appeared on the surface of the Grand Formation, and she couldn't help but click her tongue in wonder as she looked at the specter and phagocytosis that were still fighting above. I have the 9-cycle reincarnation formation. You can't take me down. I think you know better than I do. You'd better back off. With a wave of the necromancer's bone staff, the green flames transformed into a huge dragon, blasting the oncoming phagocytosis back. Old fart, remove this 9-cycle reincarnation formation for me, and I'll back off. Otherwise, I won't rest until you're dead. Also, don't forget about that, Zhuowen. As long as he comes out of seclusion, your time of death will come. The phagocytosis floated in the air, and his voice was filled with gloom. The undead sneered and said that Zhuowen isn't as good as you think. I'm afraid that he's planning for both sides to suffer. I don't think you're a fool. It's best for you to see the facts clearly. The phagocytosis turned a deaf ear to the undead's words, but his heart was filled with anger. Obviously, he was also somewhat suspicious of Zhuowen's goal. Old fart, this king will not rest until you're dead. Die for me. The devouring king knew that he had no other choice. If he let the undead go this time, the undead would become stronger and stronger in the future. Moreover, the undead would become more vigilant and wouldn't give him a chance to escape. Therefore, he had to kill the undead this time, even if he had to pay a huge price. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk the phagocytosis was wrapped in a terrifying devouring power. Like a dark cloud pressing down on a mountain, it suddenly blasted towards the undead. The undead's face was ugly, but his heart was filled with helplessness. He naturally knew what the devouring king was thinking. This time, the devouring king had relied on Zhuowen to come out. How could he retreat so easily? Inside the cave, Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the extreme fire energy was absorbed into his sleeve. However, his brows slowly creased as he looked at the undamaged death chi in his hand. For 3 days and 3 nights, Zhuowen had used the extreme fire energy, but he couldn't refine the death chi completely. Why is this death chi so difficult to refine? Could it be that there's something wrong with the refining method? Zhuowen slightly creased his brows as he silently looked at the undamaged black cube in his hand. Zhuowen's expression suddenly changed, and he immediately took out the small temple that housed the souls from his spirit ring. At this moment, the power of faith in the small temple was extremely dense. When Zhuowen's consciousness entered the small temple, he could clearly see countless souls kneeling on the ground and praying devoutly. What a powerful power of faith! I never thought that this small temple would actually gather so much power of faith in such a short period of time. This speed is much faster than the undead's method. Zhuowen murmured. He couldn't help but recall Han Yan's words. The power of faith was bidirectional. If the power of faith was forcefully obtained, not only would it not be pure, but the speed would also be very slow. However, Zhuowen had saved the souls that had been tortured by the undead and obtained their sincere devotion. Not only was the power of faith of the highest quality, but the speed of accumulation was also much faster than the undead's. Although the current power of faith was insignificant compared to the undead's power of faith, Zhuowen knew that it wouldn't take too long for him to reach the same level as the undead if he continued to accumulate it at this speed. Of course, Zhuowen didn't know how to use the power of faith. However, energy was ultimately different from divine power. The way to use the power of faith shouldn't be too different. The undead said that the Devourer King seemed to be afraid of the power of faith. I wonder if the power of faith would be of any help in refining the death chi? Zhuowen murmured to himself. His eyes grew brighter and brighter. Soon after, he held the small temple in his hand. With a thought, a dense, milky, white energy gushed out of the small temple. This milky white energy was the power of faith. When the power of faith completely enveloped the black cube, Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to find that the deathly chi in the black cube finally moved. It kept rolling as if it was facing a great enemy. Zhuowen knew that the power of faith would be of great use in refining the death chi. Hence, he immediately increased the output of the power of faith. Sizzle, 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 sizzle. Zhuowen discovered that the deathly chi in the black cube began to struggle. It broke free from the black cube as if it wanted to escape. However, how could Zhuowen allow the deathly chi to escape? He immediately controlled the power of faith to intercept the deathly chi. At the same time, Zhuowen used the power of faith to create white flames that constantly roasted the deathly chi. The deathly chi had no way out. It could only resist the white flames created by the power of faith. Chapter 22:03. 9 Reincarnation Zhuowen spent a day and a night to finally refine 1/10 of the deathly aura into an incomparably pitch-black fine needle. The death chi was very powerful, and Zhuowen didn't have much of it in his body. Therefore, in order to conserve the death chi, he naturally refined smaller objects like the needle. Although the power of faith could restrain the death chi was extraordinary. It would take some time to completely refine the death chi. Refining 1/10 of it was already very fast. Kid, those two fellows are fighting their way to your place. Zhuowen had just refined 1/10 of the death chi, and was about to continue refining it when Xiao He rushed over from the cave entrance. He couldn't help but shout. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He took a step forward with his right foot and arrived at the cave entrance. At the same time, terrifying vibrations could be clearly heard coming from his surroundings. Zhuowen raised his head to look at the sky and immediately saw undead, and the phagocytosis fighting unceasingly. They were slowly moving towards him. And before long, they were above the cave he was in. Boom, boom, boom. The aftermath of the battle was extremely terrifying. When it hit the array, dense ripples appeared. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He knew that the Devourer King and undead were doing this on purpose. The Devourer King originally wanted Zhuowen to help him, but now Zhuowen had hidden himself to refine the death chi. Obviously, the Devourer King wanted to use this method to express his dissatisfaction. As for Undead's goal, it was obvious that he wanted Zhuowen to die. It would be best if he died from the aftermath of their battle. Zhuowen's mouth was full of coldness. Neither of those two old fellows were good people, but Zhuowen, wasn't someone who could be bullied easily. Kacha! Finally, a clear cracking sound rang out. The level 7 formation that Zhuowen was in immediately shattered. Zhuowen kicked off with his right foot and immediately left the cave that had been reduced to ruins in the next moment. Junior, you should be almost done refining the death chi, right? Are you going to help me now? Zhuowen could hear the killing intent in his voice. Ha, that's only natural. It's all thanks to Senior for helping me block this old fart for so long. Thus, Junior was able to refine a portion of the death chi, just enough to deal with this old fart. Zhuowen sent a sound transmission, and with a stomp of his right foot, he rushed towards the battlefield of the undead and the phagocytosis. The moment he rushed out, Zhuowen swung his hands, and immediately threw out two extreme Dao divine swords towards the undead. The undead's eyes were gloomy. He raised his bone staff, and countless bones gathered in front of him, forming an airtight bone shield, blocking the two extreme Dao divine swords. Bang! However, when the undead was blocking the extreme Dao divine sword, the phagocytosis drilled through the air. The phagocytosis suddenly shrank and turned into a black speck of light. It shot out and headed straight for the dead spirit's heart. Pucci, the black speck of light was too fast. The undead spirit didn't even have time to react before the speck of light came out from his back, bringing with it a strand of black blood. The undead suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Just as he was about to turn around, Zhuowen had already appeared in front of the undead spirit. An extreme Dao divine sword condensed in his hand once again, and he unceremoniously slashed towards the undead spirit's neck. Pucci, the extreme Dao divine sword smoothly sliced through the undead spirit's neck, bringing with it a stream of blood and a head that soared into the sky. On the other hand, Zhuowen passed by the undead spirit's corpse and steadily landed not far away. Zhuowen was a little surprised. He never thought that he would be able to get rid of the undead spirit so easily. Originally, he thought that he would need to use the needles formed from the death chi, but now it seemed that there was no need at all. "Kid, be careful. This old fart won't die so easily." The voice of the devouring king quietly sounded in Zhuowen's mind, and soon after, an ominous premonition arose in Zhuowen's heart. Boom! A terrifying green flaming character surged out from beneath Zhuowen's feet, enveloping Zhuowen's entire body within, instantly submerging his figure. Phagocytosis, on the other hand, hurriedly retreated as he stared at the undead spirit, who was standing up again, with fear in his eyes. I really didn't expect that this 9 reincarnation formation would actually have a function that I don't know about. Phagocytosis stared at the undead spirit in front of him with a fearful expression and said coldly. The undead spirit turned its head and looked indifferently at Zhuowen, who was submerged in the green flames. Then it looked at phagocytosis and said, "You only know that the 9 reincarnation formation absorbs your life force to extend my life and use illusions. You don't know the true use of the 9 reincarnation formation. In this formation, there are 9 reincarnations for those who set up the formation. In other words, in this 9 reincarnation formation, I have 9 chances to be reincarnated. Within these 9 chances, I can kill you several times. Originally, I didn't want to expose the function of this 9 reincarnation formation. Unfortunately, you forced me into this state. Zhuowen deserved to die, and you don't have to leave. Today, I will leave you, phagocytosis, behind and erase the divine, since you left here." As he spoke, the undead spirit laughed sinisterly. His sleeves and beard fluttered without wind as he stomped his bone staff on the ground. Instantly, countless bone fragments surrounded his body, forming a sturdy bone coat. Bang! 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 The moment the bone coat formed, huge bone spikes suddenly shot out from the ground within the Bone Halberd tribe's territory. The bone spikes shot into the sky, each one no less than a towering tree. The phagocytosis snorted coldly, but he kept dodging the bone spikes that shot out from the ground. He was in a difficult situation. While the phagocytosis was dodging the bone spikes, the undead spirit moved again. He didn't know when he had appeared above the undead spirit. The bone staff in his hand smashed mercilessly on the phagocytosis, smashing the phagocytosis to the ground. However, the phagocytosis wasn't simple. He roared and spewed out a terrifying black fog. This king has miscalculated. I didn't expect you to have such a trick up your sleeve. But don't be complacent. Do you think this king doesn't have a backup plan? If that's the case, then you are gravely mistaken. The black fog grew bigger and bigger, covering the entire Bone Halberd tribe. If it weren't for the 9 reincarnation formation blocking the Bone Halberd tribe's territory, the black fog would have spread even wider. The undead spirit frowned and couldn't help but retreat to the edge of the Bone Halberd tribe. He raised his bone staff and green flames spread out in a radius of dozens of zhong to prevent the black fog from invading. Boom! All of a sudden, a gigantic black claw emerged from the black mist in front of him. The surface of this black claw was covered with distinct layers of scales, looking exceptionally ferocious and terrifying. Rumble! The black claw slammed into the green flames in front of the undead spirit and extinguished the green flames in an instant. Then, the undead spirit was caught in the claw. Just as the undead spirit was about to speak, the claw squeezed and the undead spirit was crushed into pieces. Since you have 9 lives, this king will kill you 9 times. The Devourer King's furious voice came from the black fog. This was the final trump card he had left on the phagocytosis. It was used to increase the power of the seal on the phagocytosis. In other words, the Devourer King had spent countless years refining 8,999 seals. In this short period of time, he might reseal all of them to obtain more power. After this use, the phagocytosis seals would be restored to 9,999 seals. The Devourer King would have to spend countless years to refine the seals on the phagocytosis. Moreover, it would take an extremely long time to refine the seals to such a degree. Moreover, this secret technique would cause great damage to the divine consciousness that the Devourer King had left on the phagocytosis. Chapter 2204. Undead Fall Bang. 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 The power Devourer King gained from sacrificing the layers of restrictions on the phagocytosis was too great. The terrifying black claw continued to attack Undead Fall, killing him again and again. When Undead Fall was killed for the 8th time and was about to be resurrected, the black claw slammed down again. Undead Fall screamed. As soon as he was resurrected, he immediately took out the bone staff. The bone staff suddenly exploded, and boundless green flames rushed out from it, instantly turning into a huge sea of fire. The sea of fire was too terrifying. The high temperature released caused the surrounding space to distort. When the black claw slammed into the sea of fire, its irresistible momentum came to a halt. Due to the terrifying temperature of the sea of fire, the surface of the black claw showed signs of being burnt. The ink-black scales curled up, looking extremely miserable. If one were to look carefully, the black claw was gradually dimming. It was obvious that the black claw was reaching its limit. Undead Fall also noticed this. His eyes flickered as he hastily retreated dozens of steps, trying to get as far away from the black claw as possible. Inside the phagocytosis, Devourer King let out an unwilling roar. He was only 1 step away from annihilating Undead Fall. Was he going to fail at the last step? Devourer King was very clear about his own situation. The restrictions on the phagocytosis were about to be completely sealed, and the powerful black claw was about to collapse. Devourer King originally planned to kill Undead Fall 9 times. However, Undead Fall suddenly sacrificed the bone staff in exchange for great power, blocking the final attack of the phagocytosis. Devourer King knew that Undead Fall's consciousness was about to collapse when the restrictions on the phagocytosis were completely sealed. However, he helplessly discovered that the black claw couldn't escape from the sea of fire. Hee, you didn't manage to kill me in the end. You won't have the chance to come out in the future. Undead Fall sighed in relief when he saw the black claw trapped in the sea of fire. At the same time, he felt pain in his heart. Inside the bone staff was the source of the power of the undead. It contained most of the power of faith that the undead had collected in the skeleton world for so many years. Now, in order to block the Black Claw, he released all the faith power in the bone staff. The faith power in his body could be said to be very little, and his strength was reduced by more than half. However, being able to block the killing intent of the Devourer King, Undead felt that it was all worth it. At the same time, after this incident, he made up his mind to never open the corpse heavenly road again. After all, if another person like Zhuowen were to enter the Devouring King and bring out even more powerful treasures for him, he would really be done for. Pucci, just when Death's spirit fell into deep thought, a trace of a bad premonition arose in his heart, and then he suddenly turned around and retreated swiftly. The undead spirit's reaction could not be said to be slow, but he was still a step too slow. A divine sword that was entwined with lightning and fire energy quietly flew out, and then the undead spirit's right arm, which was covered in blood, was suddenly thrown out. Clutching his severed arm, the undead looked at the young man who had appeared behind him in horror and couldn't help but ask, "You're not dead." The young man who appeared in front of the undead was none other than Zhuowen. When the undead resurrected for the first time, he immediately used the green flames to attack Zhuowen, submerging Zhuowen in flames. In the undead's view, Zhuowen didn't show any signs of struggling or coming out, so he thought that this kid was dead for sure, so he didn't pay much attention to him. Zhuowen was indeed attacked by the green flames, but no matter how strong the green flames were, they couldn't be stronger than the extreme flame. At that time, the moment Zhuowen was wrapped in the green flames, he summoned the extreme flame to protect himself, but he wasn't in a hurry to get out. Instead, he silently waited for an opportunity. Obviously, the eruption of the phagocytosis had created an opportunity for Zhuowen. Originally, with the phagocytosis being so powerful, Zhuowen thought that he didn't need to take action. So he had been hiding. When the undead used the bone staff to block the Black Claw, Zhuowen knew that his chance had come. That was why the current scene was happening. "Junior, well done. Most of the undead's strength is in the bone staff. Now that the bone staff has been destroyed, he has less than 1/10 of his strength left. Kill him." Phagocytosis, who was trapped in the green flames, naturally saw this scene, and the Devourer King's divine sense that had been left on it immediately said in ecstasy. Dead Spirit's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He hurriedly said, "Zhuowen, listen to me. I don't know why you want to help the king of this sealed land, but if you kill me, I think you will definitely regret it. As long as you kill me, the 9-cycle samsara formation will be completely destroyed. The seal of this sealed land is already severely damaged due to the passage of time. As long as the 9-cycle samsara formation is destroyed, the king might be able to break out of the seal. At that time, do you think the king will really give you benefits and not kill you?" The Devourer King's exasperated voice came from the phagocytosis. "Undead, you're bullshitting. This little guy isn't a human. He's from the same race as me. I'm not as sinister and cunning as you humans. After making a promise, you turn your back on me." Undead was startled. He looked at Zhuowen strangely. Just as Zhuowen was about to make his move, Undead suddenly transmitted a message to Zhuowen. "If you're from the same race as this king, you'll be in even more danger. If you kill me, you'll be finished as well. If you don't believe me, you can kill me." Zhuowen, who was surging with killing intent, slowly narrowed his eyes. He was a little hesitant about whether this undead was just stalling for time. "Junior, if you kill this undead, you'll have made a great contribution. As long as this king can do it, I will definitely do it for you. As long as you kill this old fart." The Devourer King's anxious voice immediately came from the phagocytosis. It seemed like he couldn't wait for Zhuowen to kill Undead immediately. Zhuowen looked at Undead, then at the phagocytosis trapped in the green flames not far away. With a stomp of his right foot, he rushed towards Undead. Undead's pupils shrunk. He hurriedly transmitted a message. "Kid, are you crazy? Don't you want to know why you're in danger?" "Not interested." As soon as Zhuowen said this, the divine sword in his hand suddenly shot out, piercing through Death Spirit's body. At the same time, Zhuowen's right hand secretly touched Death Spirit's forehead, secretly extracting Death Spirit's soul and storing it in the small temple in his spirit ring.